This week, Joe Gray, the owner and producer of the Advanced Persistent Security podcast, joins us for an interview. None other than Ed Skoudis will come on and talk about the SANS Holiday Hack Challenge. And rather than the news this week, because we've covered a lot of news this year, we're going to talk about 6 topics that we're going to be producing in an on-demand webcast series. And we're going to kind of bat around those topics, see if they're the right topics, and kind of give some people, our listeners, a preview into some of the topics we'll be discussing next year. All that and more on this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian. Excited to be here, as always, on Paul's Security Weekly.
Hi, and welcome to the show. I totally introduced our host right now, but I've got a totally awkward boner.
What? Where? Oh, hey! I'm in the studio with you guys. That's kind of cool.
Sounds like a plan.
And we'll at least have one person listening.
That's right. Just saying.
Yeah, I know, and I appreciate it, and I'm glad you enjoyed your spooning with Jeff. But you know,
Hey, that's...
Actually built a new office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, third baby on the way, so I needed a new office.
Nice.
I lost my old office. That's now the baby room.
Brought to you by... Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network.
And welcome to the show. Now, let me introduce you to a man whose sweater says something very interesting. Says, sit on my lap. But you know what? I think I'd rather sit on Jack's. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 540. I almost said 560. It's 540. 40. Because 560 is the SANS class. I always get those numbers confused. Welcome, everyone. This is our... Well, I think we're doing another episode next week, but we've dubbed this one our Christmas edition because we had our holiday Christmas party
today
here at Security Weekly.
So meaning everyone is well lubricated going into the
Everyone has been lubricating since about noon today. So just a warning, putting a warning label on this show. Some of the older folks might be napping. Yeah. So what's awesome about this is that here in studio, we have some of our regular hosts on the show. And Mr. Jeff Mann is directly to my left. Jeff, welcome. Nice to have you in studio.
It's great to be here, Paul. Try to stay awake for the whole episode.
Yes. We've been commiserating for a while. Larry Pesce is, of course, here.
Yes.
Adorning his holiday sweater. Is that Sasquatch?
Sasquatch.
The legend is real.
Yes.
In
it's
a
fantastic a gift from my good friend Mike Poor.
It's very, very nice. Well done, Mike. Well done. Jack put together his own ensemble of... He's here in studio. And are you... Father Creepy Christmas? Is it?
Why don't you creep over here and...
No, I'm good.
Creep over here and sit on my lap?
I'm good. Totally good sitting over
Talk about the first
here.
thing that pops up.
Yeah.
We have some celebrations, and I in my travels in the industry, I worked for someone, and one of the things that his son said to him one day that kind of stuck with him was his son said, "Have fun at work, Dad." And I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of our listeners, viewers, hosts, employees, sponsors, for really like allowing me to have fun at work, and I hope all of us have fun at work because you work a really good chunk of your life, so you should really have fun at it. And this has been a fantastic year. It marks almost 2 years since I've left Tenable and done this full time, and I'm having fun at work. So I mean that's important. And I'm looking forward to 2018. We got a lot of great things planned, and we had a great holiday party. So we're gonna celebrate. I think the holidays and having fun at work with these awesome champagne bottles and that pop confetti. I think really because it looks really cool on camera. So let's wait till we get the right. We're gonna put all 4 of us on frame.
There we go.
And then we're gonna.
Are
do
we supposed to take this off first?
Like
You're supposed to pierce the top.
Pierce the top. Did you?
So I
pierce?
have
some
just
piercing?
2 comments.
Here.
Stick your finger in it. There you go.
Oh,
Stick your
and
finger in the
Joff
hole.
is. I'm sorry, I forgot. Joff is here with us.
Wait,
Joff
He's right here.
there's
on the lines via Skype. Joff Thayer is here with us,
Okay.
helping us celebrate for this episode.
That was going to be my first comment was, are you going to introduce your co-hosts? And the second comment was, is this called your Champagne Daily?
Yes, this is the Champagne Daily. That's an inside joke. Thanks for bringing that up on the show, Joff. It's nice to have you, and I'm looking forward to this episode. Lots of fun things to talk about. But first,
There's an arrow that tells us which.
we're going
way
to celebrate. We're
twist.
going to twist. We're going to happy holidays and have fun at work. 1, 2, 3, go!
Woo!
Jack, you get it? Yay!
Jack
Yeah!
was coming.
Woo!
Yeah,
That was awesome.
took me a
cleaning
while to
lady.
get that to fire.
I noticed that, Jack. It's
quicker than usual.
Hey, we just talked about the first thing in the podcast.
I got some a lot in my drink, actually. Not. Wow. Joff, I'm sorry for not. How you doing, Joff? Like, we could Joff some love.
I'm doing okay. I had the most horrendous experience getting back to the U.S. from Europe. But outside of that, let's just say that London Heathrow does not know how to handle snow. I'm a little surprised, but okay.
Well, and much like episode 500, Joff, we had our holiday party today, and of course there was snow this morning.
Oh, that's fantastic. You know, I'm really disappointed I couldn't be there, but I got to tell you, it's not been a good start of my week. So it's
Let's
probably been
freak
out of
out
my-
Rhode Island and plan the next party for like July. Let's
It
see if it snows.
It'll snow. It'll snow.
It'll
for
snow.
sure.
But either way,
And by the way, Jeff, that's a lovely T-shirt that you have on there.
You like that?
I do.
And who are the
There's
characters on
Joff, right there.
Who are the characters on this shirt for our audience?
Well, the characters are 3 Black Hills employees. One, namely me, which would be
Should really have a close up.
that's on Jeff's right man boob.
Yeah,
And,
dashingly handsome one, right? Got it.
Yeah, and the guy in the middle is our epic redbeard Bo Bullock, who does Hack Naked TV, and an excellent job he does indeed. And then the lovely lady on Jeff's left man boob would be Sally, who is one awesome pen tester for Black Hills. So great collection of people. If you come to Wild West Hacking Fest, you too could see all sorts of antics and T-shirts like this.
And Bo actually hosts Tradecraft Security Weekly, which we are on schedule to do in 2018. It's a fantastic weekly technical segment that Bo does every week. So make sure you check that out.
I know
content.
Bo.
Yes.
Do you know?
Oh,
Bo?
and by the way, just to throw in an extra little bit of tidbit on those T-shirts, I gave those T-shirts Hack Vernugen to all of my European students, most of which were German, some French, and some Dutch folks. They loved that T-shirt, so very popular.
Fantastic. Make sure you check out our fine friends at itpro.tv. We're very happy to work with them. And, you know, I think for me, and we'll talk about this in later segments too, there are a lot of ways which you need to work towards educating and training yourself in information security. IT Pro fills that niche by giving you kind of like on-demand access to a whole bunch of training resources. And it's interesting. I was actually talking with someone who's a listener of the show, and they're like, you know, I hadn't heard of IT Pro TV. I heard about it on the show, and I subscribed to a subscription. I loved the content. So, like, he heard us talk about it. He was like, okay, since you guys are talking about it, I'll check it out. Checked it out and was like, holy crap, that's awesome. brought it back to his organization and said, hey, this would be great to like have an entire team or multiple teams here in our organization subscribe to this training and are going to IT Pro for the supervisor portal. So it's not just our kind of seal of approval. I'm speaking with people who have had awesome experiences with IT Pro TV. So I'm super happy that our sponsors can solve problems for our listeners. That's the goal. And that was kind of a story I wanted to share.
And training's really important. Like that's almost like a topic that we should talk about sometime.
Yeah, we'll get to, we'll get there.
It's and Don Pizzat is just such a fabulous individual. We had a good time at Wild West Hacking Fest. Don did an interview of me at Wild West Hacking Fest and a couple other people that were really, really cool. So great folks there at IT Pro TV.
I want to introduce our first guest for today, Joe Gray, who is the host of the Advanced Persistent Security podcast. Joe, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. It helps if I have the volume on my mixer whenever I speak.
No worries, no worries.
Not like we've ever made that mistake.
We're professional.
13 years in, dude, believe me, we always have our share of issues. So
every damn show,
every damn time. So, Joe, tell us.
Confetti falling out of his seal.
It's raining confetti.
So, Joe, tell us how you got to kind of set the stage here. Tell us how you got your start in information security.
I navigated submarines in the Navy for 7 years, and I had some clearance. And as I was getting out, there was really no submarines in the civilian world to navigate. So someone that was a good friend of mine said that a good friend of his was hiring to be a government contractor if I had a certain level of clearance. He put us in contact with each other, and the rest is history. So within that role, basically, I was assembling formal documents for certification and accreditation for an agency within the intelligence community.
Nice, very nice. Joe, so have you made the transition from working for the military into working for the public sector? I don't want to, if you don't want to talk about what your day job is today, that's okay, but have you kind of like made that transition?
How much clearance do you need to work in a submarine?
It depends on the job. So at a minimum secret,
2 feet,
6 feet, 5 feet,
5 feet.
Dad joke
coming at him. Yeah,
sorry.
Nice.
There's a few vessels you could probably ask that question, and the answers may vary.
So, Joe, how has your career progressed? Like, you went from a military to it sounds like a government contractor, and then if you transition in the public sector?
Yes. So I went from being a government contractor to a GS employee, and then from there I went back to being a contractor, and now I'm actually a consultant for any and everybody that will hire us.
So, Joe, what was that transition like? And we've had some of these interviews on some of our other programs as well, and it's kind of been a theme that our listeners are really latching onto. How was that transition from working, in the military to then contractor to then now kind of independent consultant? Like, what skills did you bring along with you? What were some of the challenges in making that transition from military and government work to more public sector?
So the number one issue I ran into getting out of the military and going into the non-military workforce was cleaning up my potty mouth. You can imagine how vulgar people on a submarine could speak. I've gotten to the point now to where I can kind of turn it on and off if I need to. But with that being said, a lot of the things I brought with me, so like when I was doing navigation, we would be assigned a certain amount of water space. We could go in anywhere we wanted within this area from this depth to this depth. And one of the captains of the submarine I was on, he had a policy that if you went to anyone with a problem, you had to recommend a solution. So it could be something as simple as, officer of the deck, sir, the sanitary tank is at 90%. Recommend coming to such and such feet and pumping sanitary tank number 1 overboard, or blowing SAN 1 overboard, which is basically where you just inject pressurized air into the tank and blow the poop overboard. So that's something that I tend to carry with me now. So whenever I identify a problem, I always try to have some sort of recommended solution to go alongside it. Aside from that, the transition, like from being a contractor to a government employee, that was a strange transition, because in some agencies, if you're a contractor, you're considered scum of the earth, whereas at others, you're just a normal person. Making the transition from an agency where contractors were scum of the earth to an agency where I was a government employee, but contractors were even less than scum of the earth, was very challenging, because I kind of resonated with the contractors. They kind of felt like my people, so to speak. So working through the red tape was really the hardest part for me there. I didn't stay in that job very long just because of the red tape, and the fact that I was about 25 and I was a GS-12, and I had a hard time fitting in with the other GSs. They wouldn't let me play the GS games. They made me have a bright, shiny nose. But realistically,
so, Joe, for those of us listening that don't know what a GS is, could you describe that and describe that dynamic? Sure.
So within the government, they have pay grades that, to some degree, act as equivalency to military ranks. In a time of war, it could actually be something, but for the most part, it is just a pay grade. It ranges from GS1 to GS15, which government service, I believe, is what the GS stands for. Yep. There are 10 steps to each GS, and basically, after you meet your time in service, you get bumped up to the next grade, and that basically just dictates where you are in the world. So if you're a manager, you might be a GS 13 in some organizations or a 14 in others, whereas some GS7s are managerial in other organizations. And then GS1 to GS15 basically covers E1, so a private, all the way up to a 4-star admiral or a general. And then they have a thing called the Senior Executive Service, which basically is the equivalent of flag officers, such as admirals and generals.
And so, Joe, now, what do you do today? What type of consulting do you do today?
So I'm an enterprise security consultant at Sword and Shield Enterprise Security in Knoxville, Tennessee. And as a byproduct of being an enterprise consultant, basically a lot of times I do blue team type stuff. So in my current role, I do a lot of NIST 800-171 controlled unclassified information assessments, gap analysis, incident response. Sometimes I'll do like firewall configurations. And then because of my experience in social engineering, I do a lot of pretexting and phishing engagements as well.
So in your assessment of working with enterprises today, largely from a blue team perspective, what are some of the challenges and common themes in the challenges that you see as you go from organization to organization?
Lack of standardization, lack of policy. SIMs are kind of an afterthought. A lot of people are looking to check the box. And then especially with like the NIST 800-171, which deals with government contractors, subcontractors, and the such, they're basically doing the bare minimum to check the box.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have that debate about compliance versus security all the time.
Well,
Jeff, I feel like you want to chime in here.
Well, you know, this is somewhat ancient history for me, but then I just started a job as a government contractor in the last month, so it's all coming back to me. Excuse me. The
like mud.
Government compliance, as Joe is describing, is not the same as in the commercial world. Stuff that I did for many years. A lot of paperwork, a lot of. I think, and I'm sure there's exceptions, but a lot of times I think the exercise is, can you just inundate the assessor, the auditor with, enough paperwork that they just kind of say uncle and give up. But and that's one of my problems with historically the couple times where I've had to do government 800 NIST 800 type stuff, compliance work. It's like, okay, when are we going to get around to actually seeing if you're doing anything? Because all it is just paper after paper after paper after paper.
Joe, for those listeners that haven't heard of the NIST 800 standards, could you kind of give a summary of what those are and try and focus on some of the benefits of it? Jeff's talking about, like, sometimes you get inundated with the paperwork and you're not actually solving any problems, but talk about those standards. Some of them are actually really good.
Sure. So you have NIST 853, which is the document that outlines all the security controls on the various control areas, such as physical and environmental, access control, personnel security, system integrity, communications protection, maintenance, and various things. And basically, it's just a set of controls. It's now based on ISO 27000 that takes into account all things that you should probably look at. And it's really, honestly, 853 is a great document in terms of the number of controls and what they have in terms of the content of the controls. The problem lies in the implementation and the compliance. But a document that I also mentioned was 800-171, which is for controlled unclassified information, which was basically for official use only. And it's a subset. They're not using the same control naming conventions, but it's a smaller subset of 853 for non-government organizations. The beautiful things about the NIST series, basically, it's free. Anyone can use it. So if you need some sort of compliance, say to get a risk assessment as part of your PCI requirements, you can use NIST in addition to something like, say, COBIT. So if you don't want to use COBIT, you could use NIST. There's another framework that goes alongside 853, that whole series, which is affectionately known as the Risk Management Framework. There's another one for critical infrastructure known as the Cybersecurity Framework, or the CSF, which is another subset of those same controls out of 853, but they're organized differently, and you're not dealing with system categorization, your impact level, and then of adding overlays, which are some of the further complications that you could deal with the normal NIST risk management framework.
Joe, you mentioned that some people just want to check a box. Can you give examples where people are like, oh, we want to be compliant to this NIST standard, but basically kind of like bend the rules and say, yeah, we're compliant, we can check this box, but they're not really secure?
Sure. So they pay us, we come in, or anyone, they come in, they get assessed. The assessor goes through the entire set of controls. They produce the roadmap, which basically is just another name for a plan of action and milestones, or POAM. And then based on getting that document, they are technically compliant for the year 2017. Whether they have multi-factor authentication, regardless of what kind of vulnerability management posture they're in, they're technically compliant because they've documented all of their weaknesses, and they stop right there. They have no intent of doing anything further.
Yeah, obviously there's an issue where if you pick a point in time and say that either we're compliant or we're secure, the next day is obviously a totally different, in today's technology.
But Joe's touching on what I was getting at, and the more I see the government type stuff, and I'm getting in and reintroduced to it, the more I still like PCI, because what he was saying was basically the way you prove you're doing things is you produce a bunch of documents, whereas with PCI, there's a portion of it is where you have to see that they've got everything documented, but then you say, okay, that's great. Now let's go see that you're actually doing
the results of
let's go look at systems.
Hands-on assessment.
It's hands-on. It's shoulder surfing. It's okay. You say that you're doing this. Now show me how you're doing it. And it's kind of hard to hide that. It's kind of hard to fake that.
Right.
Not to say that people fake things, but a lot of times they produce the document, but then you go out and maybe correct me if I'm mistaken, Joe, but sometimes there's an interview process where you talk to people about the documents and the procedures to try to get a feel for whether they're doing it or not. But that's just still not the same as actually sitting down, looking at the systems, looking at the tools, and say, show me how you're doing it.
Absolutely. There's 3 levels of assessment, which those are outlined in like NIST 853A and 171A, which is in draft format. And basically, you can assess things in one of 3 ways: via review of the document, be it some overarching policy. It could be an interview with, like, say, your HR manager, purchasing team, finance, or system administrator. And then the final way would be through technical observation, such as reviewing your configuration file for Secure Shell, your Apache configuration, looking at your VPN configuration, taking a look at, say, your GPO baseline or something along those lines.
I feel like in my experience, a lot of organizations will say or ask the question in such a way that says, well, what's the standard? What's the best practice for these particular set of security controls? And they often want to go to something like NIST or some other compliance standard to basically guide them into like what they should be doing to be more secure. It's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because you can take any standard that you pick, PCI or NIST or whatever, and that may not be exactly what, will get you to security. But on the flip side of that, it kind of does help. Joe, how do you like work that balance between, there are good things, like it can give you a great starting point, but how do you get people to being more secure based on some of these standards and compliance documents?
I'm a big fan of what I call the artist formerly known as the SANS Top 20, the Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls.
Nice.
And as a byproduct, basically I'll say something to the effect of, hey, you need these controls, but if you want to look at everything holistically, I recommend looking at the critical security controls because it's looking at the maturity of it. So if you can meet the first 5 controls, you're more secure. I believe the statistic is then 65% of the world. If you can meet 19 of those, you're in the top 5%. I don't remember the exact statistics, but it's something to that degree. And which that one takes a little bit more of a common sense approach in terms of, hey, you need to know what's on your network. You need, as opposed to saying, hey, here's this configuration management control. You need to have a list of all your assets. This one right here says, hey, you need to know what assets are authorized and unauthorized from both a hardware and a software perspective. And there are those roadmaps that actually allow you to cross-pollinate and compare the critical security controls to the NIST controls, as well as COBIT, HIPAA, insert compliance framework here.
I was going to go to Jack. Jack, you looked engaged earlier. You were pondering something, I could tell.
The frameworks, I think of them in many ways like certifications. There are 2 ways to approach these things. One of them is, this is dumb shit I have to do, or, hey, let's walk through this and figure out what actually moves us forward and apply compensating controls and document this and learn from the process. And whether it's you getting a certification for yourself personally for your career or these sort of compliance regimes, there really seem to be a divergent set of people organizations who, hey, we have to do this, so do the bare minimum. And
like let's go check a box based on a list that someone gives us.
Or there are, I don't think, enough organizations, I think they're fairly rare, that are like, we have to do this. What can we learn from this process, and how can we document improvement and move forward?
How can we be the best organization that it takes this as a starting point?
We got to do this thing. How can we do better? How can we get value out of it? And I think it's interesting that consultants often are trapped in the commoditized version of these things. How do you do it as cheaply as possible versus how do you do it as effectively as possible? So,
well, there's another element to that though too, because the companies that I've worked with that wanted to learn and grow and do things were rare, and usually they're the ones that have been popped in a extremely bad way. There's a middle ground there though, that companies that they want to know within their industry, within their space, what everybody else is doing, so they can do just enough so that when they get popped, they're like, well, we were doing best practice.
We were doing best practices, right? But there's, I mean, we any of us that have been in the trenches, as much as we hate it, the "I told you so" budgeting method works really well.
It does,
right? You're alone at 2 in the morning fixing stuff, but eventually you get to buy a firewall, or I'm
going to back you up. I read an article that stated it very eloquently that said companies will implement security under duress.
Yep.
And that's typically what we've observed.
Yeah.
Now, Joe, my question for you is I want to go back to the asset management piece, because we all say, the standards say, security practitioners all say, well, we can't secure what we don't know about. So we have to do asset discovery and asset management. But Joe, and I know what our answers are. Joe, what's your answer? How many companies are really doing this even close to 100% of effectiveness for asset discovery and asset management?
I have not seen very many. So one of the recommendations that I typically have when working with a client would be to implement a SIM technology so that they can accomplish the log correlation, vulnerability management to some degree. If they don't have an IDS, there's that capability to some degree as well. And then you can get an asset list out of your vulnerability scanner if you're doing discovery scans, but that also hinges upon the fact that you have to have the proper configurations there, and it's just one of those things that sometimes it's really hard to sell to management that you need to scan these networks that you don't have any hosts assigned to, or why are you trying to scan the guest Wi-Fi? Why are you trying to, we have our employees connect to the guest Wi-Fi. It's like, but you don't have network segmentation, so what's the point? Why not put them on the rest of the network? And I've not necessarily ran into that, but that's just one of those hypothetical situations that I wouldn't be surprised if I heard at some point.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the interesting tactics that I've seen this year is to really look at your basics. And I think Joe's right. There needs to be some SIM logging component in there. But looking at the sources that are kind of like what hosts are querying our NTP servers, our DNS servers, and our DHCP servers, and let's compare that with a list of what we know about. And typically that diff is like, oh yeah, I can kind of clean up my asset discovery by just looking at what's hitting those fundamental network resources in our environment.
The sad thing to me though is, and I'm old school, when I think assets, I'm thinking
It's not just school. You're just old.
I'm just old. I think data and information. Whereas the majority of the industry, when they talk assets, they're talking technology. And I always try when I was going out with customers to try to get them to focus on, what is the data that you're trying to protect? What is the information that's critical to your business?
But that's really the core. That's a great point.
It is the core
because there's applications that allow people to access that data, and then there's systems that run those applications and systems that have the clients that provide them access to. So it's kind of like this whole onion almost, right, that you have to unravel.
Absolutely.
But as you said, the data is what's in the middle. That's one of your assets.
I had many PCI customers that were very reluctant, but they were there. They were the PCI customer because they'd had incidents, and getting them to focus, which is a PCI requirement, or it's really a prerequisite to know where your credit card data is within your network. And then, they approached it with, well, if we limit our systems and limit our networks, that can limit our scope. But the process of doing it was they discovered that credit card data was in 1,000 different places in their organization. 95% of it they didn't know about. And just the whole process of discovery helped them to clean up their operations. But, they found out that 50 people in accounting had access to the entire database and was pulling down copies using wildcards and sucking down everything that really didn't need that. So there was a side benefit of cleaning up their act, but just getting them to understand, oh yeah, we need to focus on the data rather than it bothers me that we talk about asset management as what's on your network. It's like, for the love of God, why don't companies know what's on their network? The reality is they don't. But to me, it's always playing catch up, and it's sort of a backwards approach to me to figure out what's on your network by running a scanner. It's like, yeah, you should have some clue as to what's on your network.
Which is even scarier when you don't know what's on your network that you have to run the scan for.
Yeah.
Then what's on that technology that you just found on your network?
What are the applications that are on those?
Or the data running into that whole credit card thing. What file shares and what credit card databases have been downloaded to 12 PCs across the organization.
Right.
So Joe, at some juncture, you decided to create your own podcast. What was the motivating factors behind creating your own podcast?
I wanted to be like you, Paul, when I grew up.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very flattering.
Wow. Well, flattery will get you everywhere.
So I did look to you and Patrick Gray for inspiration when I was spinning it up. And to be honest, I've not published anything since February. I just got so busy between work, blogging, the speaking spree, and the SECTF at DerbyCon that I've just really not had the time to publish and get it out there. But when I first bought the advancedpersistentsecurity.net domain, I was originally trying to have it as a startup, and I was trying to run it as a business. I'd never been a consultant a day in my life. I knew nothing about business. So I was listening to a different podcast in the entrepreneurial world, Entrepreneur on Fire, now known as EO Fire, by John Lee Dumas. And he's like, hey, if you want to get your brand out there, start a podcast. So I started a podcast, and I did a few episodes by myself, and I got some feedback of, hey, people don't want to just sit and listen to you yap about something, especially when you're trying to throw a sales pitch to it. So I started bringing guests on, and to date, actually, Jack Daniel was, I believe, my third guest on the show. My first was Georgia. We did that at Hacker Halt in 2016 in Atlanta, but I kind of evolved away from the whole selling point and more into I want to have a conversation with someone that has something cool to talk about, that someone that's a noob, someone that's seasoned, someone who's, guru expert level can get something out of this conversation to some level. And that's kind of what it evolved into. And then, I just got too busy. Honestly, I've got 4 episodes recorded that I've just not had the time to edit yet.
Well, what are some of your more favorite episodes and people that you've interviewed?
I had a lot of fun with Ben Johnson, co-founder of Carbon Black. He's now at Obsidian.
Yep.
Chris Sanders was a great one.
Mm-hmm.
Rob Gresham had a lot of really good stuff. I always had a good time with InfoSec Sherpa on. The Breaking Down Security guys and myself, we did a joint show with Gary McGraw that was awesome.
Nice.
Yep.
And then the holiday episodes, it was the Defensive Sec guys, myself, BreakSec, the PVC Sec guys. They were on. It was always a good time. I think they're talking next week for that, and then Rally Sec will be joining this year as well. So those were always fun as well. I have a blast with the podcasting. Of episodes that haven't been published, Cheryl Biswas and Jason Street, those were 2 awesome episodes. I feel bad that it's not made it out for people to actually hear. It's just I've not had the time. As some people may know, I run into Jeff at several conferences. I spoke quite a bit in 2017, and that took a lot of my time that I would have otherwise spent editing.
So, Joe, what topics have you been speaking on the conference circuit this year?
Primarily social engineering and open source intelligence. I did a couple of talks outside of those arenas, dealing with data carving, one dealing with threat intelligence, and then Marcel Lee and I did a hack-in-the-box type training exercise where if someone wanted to learn the phases of an attack, they could use this virtual machine to work their way through it.
Joe, and I always try and keep up with this, but what are some of the more effective methods today in OSINT or open source intelligence gathering? It's a constant moving target for everyone, right?
It's always a moving target, and Google is. So to kind of go back with the social engineering capture the flag, most of the information I found on my target company was via Google. I used the company's name, I used the company's domain, and then I would add whatever I was looking for, be it phone numbers or whatever, even email addresses, and pump it right through Google. Other resources that I'm very fond of, Datasploit works really well for some things. I'm a huge fan of ReconNG. Michael Basil's website, inteltechniques.com.
Yep.
That's second to none. OSINTframework.com is another really good resource. And I've been playing quite a bit with Michael Basil's Bouscador Linux operating system as well.
Oh, so does he have his own platform for OSINT?
Yes. He coordinated with Dave Westcott, who helped create Remnux, to create a specific Linux distro for OSINT called Bouscador.
Well, that's awesome. I didn't know that. I'll have to check that out. Jeff, Larry, Jack, more questions for Joe?
None for me.
Larry, are those the similar tools that you use in your OSINT gathering? Is that pretty much the
Yes.
Yeah, the standard
Yeah.
set. Oh, that's good. That's good information for our listeners.
Yeah, there's such a volume of some of those types of things that there's There's just so much out there.
I'm curious because I used to do OS int. I used to call it recon back in the day. What kind of things do you look for when you do an OSINT exercise?
Well, it depends on what the target is and what I'm trying to attain. So, for example, I'm doing some research that I plan on submitting to a Las Vegas conference for the summer that deals with information from back pages to try to identify human trafficking. So with that, my targets are purely human. So I'm looking at things like email addresses, phone numbers, trying to find addresses, any social media, any posts, like for example with back pages where they're using the same user ID in multiple locations to post multiple things. That's some of the things I may look for. If I'm going after a business, I tend to try to follow the flags that Christopher Hadnagy set up for the SECTF because they're just very well thought out. It's things like, who's your exterminator? Do you outsource your IT? What browser do you use? How do you open PDFs? Do you block websites? Can you go to this website? Do you have a VPN? Shipments, trash disposal, just various things that could lead to both technical and non-technical, physical and remote things to get in. Like, for example, in the SECTF, I spent a lot of time on Facebook, and I found that my target had an employee who posted a picture of his badge. And then I pivoted from there and went to Indeed, and I found a different employee that had posted that he had upgraded the badge reader from this model to this model and had upgraded the phone system from Avaya to Cisco VoIP. So that's the type of stuff I would look at. And then with technologies, like with job descriptions, for example, I found one where there was a specific job rec that said they needed to use a specific version of this version of Oracle. So I went to ExploitDB, and, well, lo and behold, there's a SQL injection and a server-side request forgery vulnerability for that specific version. And that's the point where I stopped. But obviously, we see where that could carry into as well.
Yep. Cool. No, that's fantastic. With respect to Facebook, did you have to create an account to obtain that information, or was that on that person's public Facebook page?
It was on that person's public, because one of the things that I attempt to do whenever I'm stalking, for lack of a better term, via social media, I don't befriend people. I don't befriend people that I'm evaluating. I've got my regular account that I use for everything. You know, I don't post anything to my actual page. I usually keep everything confined to groups. But then I have a ghost account that I use for things like connecting to the API, and then just doing searches on potential targets and things like that. The same goes with Twitter. Same goes with Instagram, which I don't really get a whole lot out of Instagram, but I've got it just in case. I would say Facebook, that tends to be the one that has the most information. Although during the SECTF, I found a vice president that was complaining because he had missed a meeting in Amsterdam because he was delayed on a United Airlines flight in Newark. So a sample pretext that I could have used would have been to call him purporting to be from United Airlines to try to increase his satisfaction and give him some miles or something to make him feel better.
It's interesting, and Facebook provides facilities to control what information is shared publicly, and I feel like no one does that. Is that your experience as well?
I see a distinct rift. They either share everything or nothing at all.
Yeah. And you only need that one or two employees that share everything to really get enough pretext to conduct social engineering.
Oh, absolutely. Just through my analysis of my target, I found out that everybody that worked at this company liked craft beer. So when I was on the phone with my first target, because I only had 2 people answer the phone during the phone call portion of the SECTF, I just said, hey, it was a Friday, and I said something to the effect of, happy Friday, I can't wait to get out of here. I want to go drink some craft beer. I get off at 4:30. What time do you get off? And you know, it just went from there, because I knew that a lot of the people that worked there liked craft beer. And seeing as the company was in Louisville, if that person hadn't have liked craft beer, I would have probably assumed that they liked bourbon.
Right. No, that's awesome. More questions for Joe? We just have 5 questions for you, Joe. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
I've been thinking of these 5 questions for a long time.
There you go. Here's your chance to
Ooh,
shine.
someone that's prepared. All right.
Joe, 3 words to describe yourself?
Quirky, driven, oddball.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Kindness.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Failing upward.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
Second, and then first on the second round.
Choose two
Wow.
celebrities to be your parents.
This was the hard one.
It is the
Originally, I
most
was going to
difficult
say
one.
I was originally going to say Jeff Mann and Jack Daniel, but I'm going with Alan Turing and Mariska Hargitay.
There you go. And so where can people find you on social media and find your podcast?
Podcast is on iTunes and all the other fine podcasting platforms. It's called Advanced Persistent Security. The website is advancedpersistentsecurity.net. I'm on Twitter at C_3PJoe. One of the things I'm working on right now that's kind of interesting is actually a thing called Through the Hacking Glass on PeerList, which is a mentorship program that we're working on getting off the ground. So you can also find me on PeerList as well if you're interested in being a mentor or being mentored. This will actually be technical mentorship to help people get experience that will actually help them within the workforce. But aside from that, aside from that, I've got a Facebook page. It's Joe Gray InfoSec. It's a page, not a profile. So you don't have to friend request me or anything. And aside from that, yeah, I'm pretty much in all those places. I'm on LinkedIn as well, but that should be fairly easy to find there. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
And that's also, and so your mentorship thing that's on PeerList. How do we find that?
That's at PeerList, PeerLyst.com. Right now, we've got one post up announcing that it's coming. Again, it's called Through the Hacking Glass, also with the abbreviation of TTHG. And basically, it's just the product of Brian Austin and I were talking about ideas one day, and we identified that a lot of people, like I'm very active in mentorship. In that first job out of the Navy, I had two people that took a very active interest in ensuring my success and making sure that I wasn't an absolute moron and that I learned the things I needed to learn. And I've tried to pay that forward as I progress through my career. And right now I have, I believe, 5 mentees that I'm pushing through to learn various things from OSINT, social engineering, incident response, basic Linux even, just to work the way up. And then, we always hear these stories of, oh, here's an entry-level job that requires a CISSP, which technically requires 5 years experience. So what we're doing is we're setting up 5 levels of a range so that people can come in, they can harden a system, and then in the next phase, someone will be monitoring and someone will be pen testing at the same time based on what the first person hardened. And then the next phase, someone will come in and do incident response as a byproduct of the information they were provided by the person doing the monitoring, as well as what the pen tester actually did. And at the end, we'll all sit down, debrief it, and share notes for the purpose of everybody learning.
That's awesome. Big fan of the mentorship program, so I'm glad to hear that you're doing that. Joe, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me.
And with that, we're going to take a short break, come back with Ed Skoudis. Stay tuned. Logarithm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns in application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logarithm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. Make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV's courses live and on demand worldwide, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Their team solution provides access to a supervisor portal for full control over your team's training schedule and group analytics. Go to itpro.tv/Security Weekly and use the code SW30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. I've got the cast and crew here in studio and on the lines via Skype. And, of course, as if the holidays weren't exciting enough.
Magical, even.
There's magical. There's Santa. We just had our Christmas party. We ate
Santa.
food and drank beer. Jack is dressed as Santa.
Jack is being merry.
I mean, the holidays are just an exciting time. To add to that excitement, those that have tuned into the show or followed Ed Skoudis' work know that Ed and his team at Counter-Hack Challenges releases the Holiday Hack Challenge. Ed is kind enough to come on the show and announce this year's Holiday Hack Challenge. So, Ed, welcome back to Paul Security Weekly.
Hey, thanks, guys. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you as well, Ed. And last time we were talking about your office, and we were talking about that, just before the segment started. But the focus of today's conversation is really getting into some of the details and information surrounding the Holiday Hack Challenge, which it's exciting for me because it's such an awesome give back to the community. And that's one of the things that Ed, very early on in my career, instilled on me and said, you got to give back to the community. And he's like, Paul, once you do, everything else falls into line. And now here's Ed. We do the show, the podcast, and now here's Ed basically giving all these challenges out to the community that are freely available that you can use to security training and education, which is going to be one of our topics that we talk about, and use that to enhance your skills and get some real world training really in a contained environment, so to speak. We talked about containers briefly too. So Ed, why don't you kind of give us a little introduction of the Holiday Hack Challenge and some of the things you're working on, and like when is it going live? Is it live? How do we get it?
It is live, actually. We launched about 34 minutes ago. And we've been working on this one for over a year, and it's exciting. I mean, I tell you, the team has been working so hard. I'm so proud of these guys. Artists, musicians, developers, game designers, challenge designers. I think this is our best one ever. I mean, it's got a deep, rich story. It kind of tells the backstory of the North Pole. It's got amazing hacking challenges. It's got, the music is phenomenal. So we just released the soundtrack, and you can download the soundtrack for free right now. You go to holidayhackchallenge.com, and there's a thing there that says free album. So you know who we got to do the music this year, huh?
No. Does Josh Wright play guitar? Please tell me Josh Wright plays guitar.
That's next year, 2018.
Okay.
But 2017, we've got Dual Core.
Nice.
We've got Keith Myers, and we've got Count Ninjala. The three guys. It's amazing. The music is so good. I'm really happy about that. But you got to check it out, holidayhackchallenge.com. It's all free. We run it open to everybody. We usually get about 10,000 people around the world that play this.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we're hoping that we'll get more than 10,000 this year, and I thank you for your help in getting the message out to folks. We do this as a gift, really, to the community. I've been working on Holiday Hack Challenges now for 16 years. Starting about 7 or 8 years ago, some friends started to help me, and then more and more friends started to help me, and now there's probably over 20 to 25 people that work on crafting this thing, this storyline. Every year we release essentially a new Christmas world for people to hack into and people to do data analysis. I mean, it's not just offensive. There's a lot of that, but there's also data analysis. There's cyber defense oriented things. And it's fun. It's all put in a fun story.
Ed, I want to stop you right there because I think there's people listening now that are like, well, they could be almost like intimidated. Like, well, how do I participate in this challenge? Like, this sounds really like complicated. Like, what? Like, take someone through like how they get engaged with this challenge and kind of help them overcome some of their fears where they may be like, I don't know if it's quite for me.
Yeah, so we design it so that there's some really simple, straightforward challenges. Also, there's some really complex challenges, and they're kind of easy to identify. We build it in such a way that the first challenges you'll see are the easier ones, and then they get more and more complex. We actually build it with the hope that adults will play, but they'll also have their children involved, and high school kids or even younger, elementary school kids. They're kids as young as 6 years old that play this. We have a video game component, and you work your way through the video game, retrieving assets and so forth, and you have to reconstruct something. This year, what has happened is there are giant snowballs that are falling down the mountain of the North Pole, and they're smashing into things, and you have to figure out who is throwing those snowballs, why they're throwing those snowballs, and you have to redirect the snowballs so they have minimal impacts to the elves. And as you work your way through this, you'll learn that there was just a terrible disaster just a week ago. A great interdimensional tornado hit the North Pole. And it took this book. The elves have this special book. They call it the Great Book. It is like a relic that they have. And it shredded the Great Book, and it put pages of the Great Book all over the North Pole and beyond. So what you got to do is you got to hack into these systems, and there's different levels of challenges. Some of them are really easy, some of them are really hard. You hack into the systems and you retrieve the pages of the Great Book. And as you do, they're all put into your stocking. Your stocking is sort of the inventory of all of your achievements. But we designed it so that even if you're brand new to information security, you've never hacked anything in your life, you can get into this. You could start playing. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but over the last week or so, actually about 2 weeks, we've been posting blog posts to Sans Pen Test blog. All of those blog posts are hints for all the challenges.
So is this like a VM that I download or a website that I visit or a combination thereof?
It's all on the website.
Okay.
So everything happens within your browser.
Okay.
So in your browser, you go there. There's a video game. It's a 3D physics puzzler where you have to put little objects on the screen and the giant snowballs bounce through them. It's really cool. And then as you do that, you open up things. There's also little terminals that are distributed throughout the environment. If you click on a terminal window, boom, it pops up a terminal inside your browser, and then you can type things and you can hack systems that way. So you don't need to bring any tools.
You create a virtual environment for the player inside of your web browser, essentially.
Yep. And you know what we use for it? Docker. So
of course.
Yep, it's all containers. It's all containers. Containers and containers. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, what have you? And one of my topics that I plan to speak about next year is kind of some of my journeys with Docker and containers and the newer kind of DevOps environment.
Yep.
What are some of the lessons learned that you have learned doing this all inside of containers and Docker?
Oh, well, the thing that's hard is to make sure we give you enough access within Docker to do what you need to do without giving you total control so you can start squishing other players.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing. And the team's done quite well with that, knock on wood, in setting that up. Also, obviously we don't want to give you root or anything like that. That would cause problems. But we want to give you shell access. We're also, in addition to using Docker, we've got some restricted shells and things in that. And you have to do some limited escapes of restricted shells. We also are using Google Compute a lot for this. And Google very graciously donated some Google Compute time for us to run this thing and gave us, of course, permission to do it on a worldwide basis. So we're super thankful for that donation that Google gave us.
So players are essentially executing commands within a container in a contained environment.
That's right.
I mean, that kind of speaks to some of the security controls that we can build into this infrastructure.
Yep. And we tried to build those security controls in, while at the same time having vulnerabilities there that you could exploit, but exploit it in a fashion where it doesn't blow up the game.
And all of this is going to stay up even though 10,000 hackers are going to come at it.
That's the idea.
That's the challenge. I mean, the challenge is not just on the user, but there's a huge challenge on you, yourself, and your team to make sure that it withstands 10,000 hackers playing this game.
I'd say it's probably had a healthy dose of Viagra, but I can hardly contain myself.
Yeah.
So the team behind this, I mean, from the design and development team, they're fantastic, but also the operations team. These folks work so hard. And I want to point out, because Jason Blanchard told me that I had to point this out. Jason from marketing.
He's in marketing. Yeah, I've heard that.
But Jason said, make sure that you say that the people who built this are the same people who work on the SANS pen test curriculum, writing the labs, writing the challenges there. We take a lot of lessons that we learn from the SANS labs and use them in Holiday Hack. We use a lot of stuff in Holiday Hack, new technologies and such, that we then port into SANS labs and into Net Wars and into Cyber City. I mean, we're constantly experimenting with these new technologies and flowing them into the different offerings we have. SANS classes, of course, Net Wars, Cyber City, Capture the Flag events, and then the big, sort of thing that we do each year for the community is Holiday Hack.
So suffice it to say, if you are playing Holiday Hack Challenge and you're having fun and you like what you see and you're challenged, that's kind of a sneak preview as to some of the curriculum that you would see in some of your other offerings, correct?
Yeah, they're directly related to each other. And we hope people learn a whole lot just doing Holiday Hack Challenge. I mean, if you just do that, you get a whole bunch. There's also, I should point this out, there are hints, not only at our blog, but within Holiday Hack Challenge itself. There are a series of elves that you encounter as you work your way through the challenges, and they give you hints. You can ignore their hints and try to do it on your own, but we want you to take hints. The reason we build this is to help people learn. So we try to be as generous as we can with the hints. Also, these elves have Twitter handles that are included as you read the storyline. You can see the Twitter handles of the elves, and they will give hints periodically via Twitter too. So you've got the built-in hints that comes via chat with the elves. You've got the hints that come from the blog postings that we've done. And then we've got these Twitter feeds that will also include additional hints if we see people getting stuck with certain things. But it is fun. I mean, Sam the Snowman, he's the one that starts the whole thing out. And you see Sam the Snowman and he tells you these giant snowballs are causing a big problem and you got to help us find who's done it. Now, there's a series of 10 questions at the end. And the questions go from the easiest to the hardest. And you have to work your way through each of those 10 questions. We accept partial answers. People email their answers to us, and we go through every single answer that they send and send a response back to them. But we go through all the answers. And even if you're just partially correct, that's fine. We want people to send stuff into us and to learn. It also has a lot of integration with Twitter, not just in the hints. But there's several dozen achievements you can get as you bounce the snowballs into different things and so forth. And there's automatic a Twitter thing, a button where you can just tweet your recent achievement, and it automatically goes into Twitter and does that for you. So we're looking forward to seeing people unlock various things. Like I said, we've been working on this for over a year, and tonight's the night. The folks in the secret room right over there were just saying it feels like, I mean, we just gave birth. Now I don't know what it feels like to give birth. That's what they said.
You look really good for just having given birth.
You're I'm exhausted. The guys, they've been working so hard. I've been working so hard. I haven't been sleeping much. But I'm really proud of this team.
So Ed, I analyze a lot of people's kind of business propositions, right? And one of the things is they're like, well, this product is for everyone. Your Holiday Hack Challenge, if I've never done a challenge before, or I'm an experienced security professional, should they start with this year's Holiday Hack Challenge?
Absolutely.
Or are there a class of people that maybe should go do some other things before they start this hack challenge? Like, who should approach this hack challenge and help them overcome some of their barriers to entry?
So we designed the challenges really for everyone. I mean, there are challenges in there so that if you're brand new to this space, you will be able to figure out how to do it. Remember, go to the blog posts. The blog posts kind of walk you through step by step on how to do certain things there. So this is designed for anybody that is interested in information security and wants to get some hands-on keyboard skills. Even if you don't have hands-on keyboard skills, you can start with this. That said, if you're a professional penetration tester, I mean, one of the best in the world, we've got challenges for you too. I mean, all the way at the end. They're going to be in our deeper levels and such. But we wanted to make it broadly approachable. And my favorite thing, and this has happened every year for the last couple of years, is when people play these challenges and they have their kids involved. So what they'll do is they'll have the kids, oftentimes they're sitting in their jammies and you can see a Christmas tree or something behind them, and they're in there and they're playing the video game, retrieving the assets, like things like packet captures and files and stuff like that, and then giving them to mom or dad or big brother, big sister.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah.
And so it lights up. It's like, oh, I played the video game and got this stuff. I hand it off to my mom. My mom shows me how we can use that in security and in hacking things. So now we have kids as young as 6 that are involved with this, and it's really cool. So it is for everybody. We purposely build it so that everybody can get something out of it.
Yeah, and that's really been the challenge for you, Ed, and that's a significant challenge, is to build something that appeals to all those different people that want to be interested in our field, and that's something I personally, knowing for some time, that you've kind of worked on for quite a number of years to build to this point.
Well, thank you for that, Paul. I tell you, I've long said this. It's easy to build easy challenges. It's actually easy to build hard challenges. The thing that's hard is building a range of challenges that appeals to a large number of people, especially those in the middle, so that they feel that they've accomplished something. And my hat's off, literally, my hat's off to the team of challenge builders that we had this year. Josh Wright headed up that team. You guys know Josh very well. He's been on the show many times. Chris Davis developed a lot of the challenges as well. Jeff McJunkin, you guys know Jeff. He's on the show. He's developed a lot of the challenges. Moses Hernandez, not a counter hack guy, but he's a SANS instructor. He designed one of the challenges, one of the deepest ones. So there's a whole bunch of people that develop these challenges, but Josh was the one that planned them out to make sure that they go across that scope of really straightforward, easy stuff to crazy, mind-bending, complex stuff.
Yep.
How's our mutual? Hold on, Larry. Just on the tip of my brain, our good friend Ron Bowes, a mutual friend Ron Bowes, is working for you now. I love Ron. We have quite a history when he was working at the Nmap project, and then actually worked at Tenable with me for some time. So I get to. He was my coworker for some time, which was fantastic. And now he works for you at Counter Hack Challenges. So how is our friend Ron? We love Ron. He's awesome.
He's fantastic. So he started on October 9th working for Counter Hack full time, and he's been working on Holiday Hack exclusively through that entire span. He developed all the code that does authentication, that gives you an avatar. He implemented, there's an in-game chat system so you can chat with other players. We want the game to be social, so you can meet other people, play together and stuff like that. Ron built all of that infrastructure. And then, of course, Evan Bowes, I don't know if you know Evan, he's an amazing guy. He did a lot of our video game development.
Wait, is he related to Ron?
No, Evan Booth, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, I know Evan. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so we were saying that every new employee of Counter Hack has to have a last name that starts with B-O. So we got Evan Booth and Ron Bowes, and so we're looking for our next hire.
There you go.
Ed Skoudis.
Yeah. Sorry, Larry, you had a question.
I've spent a good amount of time working with Josh, working on the new CTF for 617, and absolutely Josh is brilliant at putting together this sort of mesh of from beginning to super challenging, and being able to flesh all of that out, and it was lots of fun. And I suspect that Josh has one up in that the quote that Josh told me was that the CTF for 617 was one of the most complex, most challenging CTF game designs that he had worked on, and now 2017 Holiday Hack Challenge has come out. I suspect that he's been one-upped.
Yeah, he one-upped himself, I think.
Agreed.
And it's a really beautiful thing. I really hope people play this and have fun. And I really want to emphasize that social aspect of this. We award prizes for people who do well on this, and the prizes go to individuals. But we want people to play as teams. I understand that there's teams, all over the world where folks will get together for the holidays for, they'll set aside a day in the office or set aside, some evening together, and they get together in a chat channel and they work on the challenges, sharing information. Sometimes people like email us and say, is it okay if I, play with somebody else and I work my way through?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, Ed. So can people play as a team or as an individual or both? And is that all cool with you?
It's all cool because it's all about learning. It's learning. It's about networking, social interactions. We want it to be fun, and we don't want to say to somebody, no, you can't do that with your team at work. I tell you, there's teams in the military, there's teams in the government, very serious agencies who take the day off and focus on Holiday Hack Challenge.
But I think that's a great team building thing to say, hey, we all work together as a team. Let's take some time and let's go solve this problem together. Yep. And that's kind of a benefit that I had, honestly, Ed had never considered to say, hey, let's all get together. Let's play Holiday Hack Challenge together and just see how far we can get and have fun for a day.
Yeah, and I'd argue that maybe the way that you've designed it is where it's Holiday Hack Challenge, it's not so much a challenge against other people while it is. It's very much a challenge for yourself. It's to challenge yourself to be a better info security professional. To learn something new.
Exactly. And you know, there's constant reinforcement throughout. I mean, there's a bunch of little achievements that you can have. You're able to hack this thing, or you're able to get inside this terminal, or you're able to bounce a snowball this way. And you get all these little achievements, and they all accrue in your stocking. And then you open up and unlock hints. And again, your stocking is like, in this year's challenge, your stocking is sort of your home base where you got all the different things you're able to achieve. But we want to have that reinforcement. As you're developing your skills, things pop up on the screen saying, you just did this. That's fantastic, right? Do you want to tweet about it? Yeah, it is. It's all about learning. And, you know, some people get hyper competitive about this kind of stuff. But for those players that aren't hyper competitive, hey, that's totally cool. You know, spend an hour here or there with it. Next week, we're going to have mobile support so that you can play on your tablet or on your phone. So we built it kind of for that too. That wasn't finished today, so we pushed all the stuff that works within your browser. Chrome works wonderfully. We've also tested Firefox and some of the other stuff. But next week, we'll have mobile support too.
Ed, did you, back in the day, ever play the video game called Myst?
I did, in fact. Some people say my office looks kind of like it's from the video game Myst.
It does, actually, now that you say that. I found Myst to be more frustrating than it was kind of engaging.
Yeah.
And did you kind of get that same sense and build your environment today to be more engaging and a little less frustrating for people?
Yep, I really hear you. I remember when I first got Myst, you know, I brought it home. It's on a CD-ROM. I had a new CD-ROM.
Well, was there a predecessor to Myst, Ed, that I can't remember? Was there?
It was a sequel.
There was two that were kind of a sequel to it.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it. Anyway, Myst is the one that comes to mind.
It had such hype, and I got it home, and I started playing, and I remember getting frustrated with it and just saying, you know, I can't get out of this. I'm stuck. So within Holiday Hack, the way that we deal with that is we have ample hints. There's hints all over the place if you want to take them. And also the social aspects. We put a chat room in there so that as you're working on a level, you could say, hey, how are you guys doing this? And we're not going to stop anybody from telling you how they did it. I need a hint. Somebody needs a hint. Great. And we're all in there too. You know, you'll see us in the chat and so forth. I'm real Ed Skoudis. You know, we've got real Tom Hessman, real Daniel Pendolino. They're on the ops side.
Yeah, and then there's Ron.
Yep. There's Ron. I think he's
so that's as far as I've gotten, Ed, as I've made it to manage to log in to go play the game, and I haven't moved past.
Hey, we're on the air. What are you doing playing a game?
Nothing. Nothing. I mean, this is very topical.
Yes, it is.
But I'm spending time chatting with some of the folks there already, and the social aspect so far is great.
Yeah, that's so cool to hear. That's so cool to hear. Have you seen the video game yet?
I have not, because I've been chatting, and
okay.
I've got this thing that we do called a podcast that I've been engaged with.
Well, it's called North Pole and Beyond. That's the whole video game realm. And you know, there's this other thing. I think you guys are really this. So a couple times it's been said. In fact, Rob Lee was the first one that told me this. Rob Lee is the SANS forensics curriculum lead. And then I heard it said a couple more times at the Hackfest event that you guys were at. But they say, you know, if you're like an evil bad guy bent on world domination, the time to act is when we release Holiday Hack Challenge that same day, because all the InfoSec professionals around the world are busy doing what Larry's doing right now, looking at Holiday Hack, so they're not looking over their logs and stuff. So somebody asked me at Hackfest, are you worried that bad guys act on the day that you release Holiday Hack? And my answer was actually no, because I think the bad guys are probably playing our game too. So.
Very true.
So
Very true.
So the website is holidayhackchallenge.com.
That's right.
And one of the things that I notice is when I come to the page, like there's some stuff that I have to read. There's a video that I can watch. There's information.
I did the video.
Nice.
Yes,
nice.
and I didn't watch the video, but I'm noticing that the front screen of the video is very much the beginning feel of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the original one with Burl Ives.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you know, my point is that I think some of the junior people that we try and mentor in our field tend to like go straight towards execution or like trying a bunch of stuff. And what I found is and I did this early on in my career too, like I didn't always take a step back and kind of read and consume and digest information and then kind of proceed forward.
You mean like instruction manuals?
And yeah,
like
like
that?
I never read the manual. Like
Who
Mist
reads
is
the
somewhat of an
manual?
example, right? Or like any kind of coding challenge. Like I just want to go in and like start trying stuff. But what I realized over my career is like I need to take a step back, consume all the information, trying to put it together.
Context.
Does the challenge really help the coach people into paying attention to, like, I feel like, knowing you for as long as I've known you, Ed, that like every word and every video in here contains a piece of information that I have to digest and consume in order to be successful. So does it help newer people with that mindset?
I think it does. I hope it does. Our thought is people will kind of skim over some of the stuff initially, then they'll jump into the level, start working their way, and get stuck. And they'll make some progress, right? I mean, they'll make some, but then get to a certain point where they can't go any further. And then they'll go back.
Yeah.
And they'll reread we call it the narrative, right? It's called the story in the thing itself, but they'll reread that because there's things in there that Sam the Snowman says. He's our narrator this year. And Sam the Snowman, he actually he thinks that the reader thinks he might look like a character from Breaking Bad.
Oh yeah, that guy. That guy.
Anyway, so Sam the Snowman, you got to read what Sam says. You got to look at those questions. Each one of those questions, we ask you 10 questions, is very carefully worded. Also, some people might think there's typos in it. There aren't, at least as far as I can tell. It's all done very deliberately. If you look at our last couple of years, there were things that were purposely spelled a little unusually, and that was because it was a hint. For example, it was 2 years ago in the Gnome in Your Home Challenge. We said you need to show Dan your results. And, it was exactly. And then I remember 3 years ago, we said it will shock your heart. And that was supposed to be you use shell shock or heart bleed or both.
Right.
Yep. There's stuff like that in here too, where the wording is done in a particularly deliberate fashion as hints. So it rewards those people who are reading through it carefully and subtly.
It's interesting. It reminds me of my journey with Docker, right? Like I would go try stuff and then go back and like read stuff and be like, oh, like I really need to read and consume and digest this information before I go forward. And it was kind of that back and forth, like you're talking about, that I would implement something and go back, oh, nope, I need to read and consume the details and then get enough hints to move forward. And in my case, it was Docker, but in your case, it's a holiday hack challenge.
Yep. And there's another, I had an experience like that myself. Larry Pesci did a webcast with me, what was it, 2 weeks ago, Larry? Something like that?
A little bit longer than 2 weeks, but yeah, 3. Okay. It's all a blur.
Yeah, holiday hack has like consumed my life for the last 2 or 3 weeks. But anyway, so Larry did this webcast, and I was sort of the narrator, I guess. But Larry was the heart of the matter, and it was on some Bluetooth attack tools.
Yeah,
I had spent like 2 full days trying to teach myself the stuff, like 3-4 months ago, that Larry went through in 12 minutes. And it's like, Larry, where were you 3-4 months ago?
A phone call away, my friend.
I should have thought of it. But there's a lot of stuff like that, and I do hope Holiday Hack Challenge, if you pay careful attention and you look at it, it will help you learn on your own. But read the hints. The elves are there to give you hints. The elves are not trying to distract you or anything like that. And we even tell you which elf to talk to get specific questions. We even tell you which level you can find that elf in. And some people say, look, I don't want to play the video game. I'm not into that. My response to that is farm out the video game playing to a child then. Ask the child to play the video game for you, and then you don't have to. But
Ed, I don't have a child. Well, they're abundant in this Christmas season.
There you go. I feel like a lot of what we do in information security and certainly information technology is like discovering the hints. When you're troubleshooting a problem, typically the hints are there.
Yeah.
And when you get stuck on something, you've kind of glossed over a hint. And I've never thought of the challenge in this way, but now that you describe it tonight for me, Ed, like I feel like it helps train you to look for hints. And if you do that in your job today, like those hints are in there in your log files. Like if you look at that log entry, you might have skimmed over it. Like go back and think about, that log entry really means that.
Or the tip is in the manual, or the thing that you need is in the manual. My wife makes fun of me all the time. She's like, "Oh, you bought that new technology thing. Where's the manual?" I'm like, "I threw that away half an hour ago."
Yeah. But like that manual said at least 1 or 2 things that like if you really paid attention to, you wouldn't have gotten stuck.
Those
like
are the
how to
key
set
words.
the alarm on the alarm clock.
Pay attention.
Like how to set the alarm on the alarm clock, or make the VCR not blink 12.
Yeah, but let's face it, gents, that those of us who are in this industry, genuinely are not good at paying attention.
Who said that? Who is that?
I hear a voice.
That's
that?
a good point, Joff.
Yeah, but look, I just got to say, Ed, first of all, absolutely fabulous effort. I mean, I love what you're doing. I forwarded the URL to both my kids. I hope they play. And actually, I'm trying to leverage them as talent to contribute to myself playing. And I will say that others, if you're a professional pen tester or somebody who's been in the security industry for a long time, don't turn away from this. I mean, this is quality stuff. I've done it a couple of times over the past few years. Not enough, frankly, but I really, it's great stuff. So I really appreciate what you're doing for the industry.
Joff, that means so much to me. And it's not just me. It's this whole team here at CounterHack and all of our friends, too, that contribute to this. I don't want to take the spotlight. I want to point the spotlight on those guys and just the tremendous, tremendous work they do. I mean, you guys maybe Tom Hessman and Daniel Pendolino. They do the ops stuff, and they're super busy right now, right in the secret room next door, running all this stuff. And really, it really is a team collaborative effort. A lot of people working really hard on this, and we're really thankful that people want to give their time and attention. I mean, we have 10,000 for the last 2 years or so. I'm hoping we can get to 12 or 13,000 people this year. I'm already starting to work on next year's. I started about 4 months ago at Sands Las Vegas, working on the 2018 Holiday Hack Challenge. I've got the whole story in my brain, and I've started to share it with some of the people on the team because we're going to start building it soon. We just launched this one. We're starting the next one. Yeah.
I do have one observation, and I don't know how this is going to play out. I don't know if this is a good thing or not, but you released this on the same day of the new Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
So either there's a bunch of people out there that are really torn as to what to do right now, or this is a great opportunity to go see Star Wars because there's a bunch of people starting the Hackfest.
Oh.
Or there's a lot of people starting the Hackfest, whatever the reverse
Or there's
is.
a lot of people playing Hackfest while at Star Wars.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or they don't have the mobile version out yet.
Or there are 3 Star Wars movies and a series of apostasies which have followed in the decades since.
There is that.
Or there's a lot of depressed people about net neutrality that maybe could lift their spirits by playing Holiday Hack Challenge.
Well, there you go.
Or
You
wherever
dropped the
you
net
stand on the
neutrality
issue.
bomb.
Yeah.
But we're not doing news
Or
this week.
celebrate.
Or
celebrate.
Or there are 6 people that are neither at Star Wars nor playing because they're on a podcast.
That's right.
That's us.
There is that. Yes.
There is that.
I view the whole Star Wars coincidence in timing is actually some load balancing on our part. Those people who are at Star Wars are not consuming load right now on the Hack Challenge, so that tomorrow they can consume some load. We always try to do a soft launch, and this kind of freaks people out, where, when's it going to be out? When's it going to be? We don't want to say a specific date because we will be crushed from our
right.
perspective.
Yep.
So we roll it out, and we announce it. We just did an hour ago or so, and people come. They can play though the whole holiday season. Officially, this is open for competitive practice until January 3rd. But then we'll leave it up forever. We're going to publish answers. And if you want to do last year's challenge, it's up right now. You can't win a prize for it, but it's still there. 15 years of challenges. They're all up all the time. So, but the competitive span on this one runs from today until January 3rd. And first place prize is a free SANS class. You take it via SANS on demand.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you award prizes and winners at.
So we read every entry that comes in, and we're looking for very specific. We want entries that are technically correct, but we're looking for things that have specific approaches that are interesting or novel, that the write-ups are particularly good. I mean, our grand prize winner, we make the official answer for the challenge, so that's what we're kind of looking for. But you get T-shirts. We have what we call honorable mentions, and these are just real good ones. And then we have super honorable mention, and those. They're really, really solid. Remember,
I feel like that's like the winners on Total Recall. Is that?
Yeah.
Oh no, that's different. Never mind.
And then we have best creative answer, best technical answer, and then the grand prize winner is just the best overall answer. And these things are all essentially hand graded. We've got a guy on the team that reads all of the answers, and then he kind of filters them out, and then has some of the rest of us read the best of the best. And then ultimately we get together and we choose and award the prize to that person.
Are there challenge coins associated with winners?
Not yet. There might be in the future.
I gotcha.
Jason Blanchard from marketing Talk about that. We don't have them yet. Maybe 2018. Wait till you see 2018. Oh my gosh, it's going to blow your mind.
Ed, are there what new technologies could you integrate into 2018 that you may be able to talk about that you might be thinking about for playing around with? I'm genuinely curious. Like, I feel like you've led kind of the bleeding edge technologies and all these challenges. Like, what are some of like the next generation? I hate that term, but next generation technologies that you would implement?
So for 2018, let me just, I don't want to talk about that now, no offense.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because we launched 2017. So for 2017, one of the cool things that we've got in this year's is data analysis and de-anonymization. Because, I mean, that's been, in the press a lot lately. So you're going to get a data feed associated with Santa's servers, and you're going to have to go through that and figure out, who's doing what. And some of the data is anonymized, but it's not quite anonymized appropriately. So you'll be able to do de-anonymization and figure out who's on the naughty and nice list and stuff like that. So that was one of the big things that we added this year. Now, some people might say, well, wait, that's not very technical. Maybe not, but it is a really, really important concept, because you see these organizations who are releasing data that they think is anonymized, and yet people are still able to pierce that veil of anonymity. And we really want to make that point this year. So Josh Wright came to me, this was in about July, and said to me, I want to do something on data de-anonymization. And I'm like, really? And he really talked me into it, and it's really cool. So
yeah, I remember Josh talking about that in some of his talks over the last couple of years about some of the de-anonymization of data and Netflix and all that stuff. So that's really cool to see, because it's a thing.
Yeah, he specifically said to me, look at the Netflix thing and what people could figure out based on who was watching what. And that's, pretty serious privacy violation. So we wanted to model that kind of thing, but in the context of the North Pole. We also look at some of the biggest hacks of the previous year, biggest exploits and so forth. I'm not going to name them because you got to figure it out on your own. But some of the biggest attacks and then the mechanism behind those attacks to give you the opportunity to do those attacks.
Oh, so there's struts involved.
I was going to say.
What you talking about?
Struts couldn't be on the list.
We were hoping Ed would drop some hints, and I think we just dropped it for him.
Come on. Struts is a solid
way to go,
framework. If it's a solid crap, it's a solid framework.
I opened the door, you guys walk through it. So that's all.
There you go.
Very nice. Very nice.
Well, Ed, it's always nice talking with you. It's kind of interesting. We're going to talk about one of the topics that's near and dear to your heart, the state of penetration testing. In our next segment, we're going to touch on that. And I know we talked a lot about that in the conference that you held that we were in attendance of. And so that's awesome. But we thank you for the Holiday Hack Challenge. Certainly, enabling people to be engaged with this field is something near and dear to our hearts, and we're glad that you do this to support that. So,
well, thank you for the opportunity to tell people about it, and also I'll pass on your thanks to the team, because it's really all of their hard work. So, happy holidays, guys! Enjoy the rest of your holiday show and party, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Ed. One last quick question. Does Trevor make an appearance?
I can't say. You don't know.
Okay.
We're trying to keep the bugs out, but
Smash burger.
Oh wait, no. What is Chip? Chip is your dog, right?
Yeah, Chip's right over there.
Okay. Does Chip have any kind of facet into the game?
We talked about it. There is a place where Chip could go in the game. Maybe we'll put him in the game next week or something.
Here comes Chip.
You can put Chip right in the game. That's fine. You just plug him right into the Matrix. It's fine.
Let me show you Chip. Okay.
Chip's and he's got his festive hat on. That's wonderful.
Oh, he looks so festive.
A little bit higher.
Yeah, I'm trying.
There you go.
Yes, Chip. Yeah,
Chip's excited about the Holiday Hack Challenge.
Chip's a good dog.
My boy. Chip's my boy.
Which, for the record, Chip is available, the non-chocolate chip version, at Target, our local Target, for $150.
Nice.
Yeah, awesome.
So the website is holidayhackchallenge.com.
You got it.
Yep.
Everyone should go there and play.
Go play.
Fantastic. Ed Skoudis, thank you very much for coming back on the show and telling us about this year's challenge. Very excited.
It's great to see you all again. You guys look very festive, so it's just awesome.
It was good timing. Ed, thank you again. And with that, We're going to take a short break, come back, and I don't know, have a little roundtable discussion about some topics. So stay tuned. Cryptography is all about secret keys that need high-quality entropy to be truly random. NetRandom from Whitewood Security delivers pure quantum entropy on demand across the entire data center and out to the cloud. Think NTP, but for quantum entropy. Inoculate your applications from making weak crypto keys all without having to change a line of code. Visit getnetrandom.com to learn how you can take control of your entropy supply and ensure crypto security today. Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. Onapsis is the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. The SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security certification training and research. Visit SANS.org to explore their full curriculum and latest training offerings.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. We did several webcasts this year. If you happen to have missed one of those webcasts on some fantastic topics from our sponsors, Onapsis and Signal Sciences and others that were mentioned in this role right here, in collaboration with folks from Security Weekly. I know Larry did one with Pony Express as well, which went over very well. If you missed one, you can go to securityweekly.com/on-demand. There are actually 4 webcasts that you can register for and watch if you happen to miss them and didn't have the opportunity to register for. So go check those out and let us know if those are topics that you're interested in. For 2018, we've identified yet another series of on-demand webcasts that we're choosing the 6 or 7-ish topics throughout 2018 that we feel are relevant to, well, both our sponsors and want to make sure that those are relevant to the security community as well. I think Michael Santarcangelo really put it kind of in perspective for myself and many of us here at Security Weekly and said, really Security Weekly is one of those bridges between industry and the community. And I'm like, wow, we've been that for a long time. We just never articulated it that way. And so I thought that was really great. In that light, I just want to maybe go over some of those topics that we'll be doing in 2018 as part of our on-demand series. Maybe those are the right topics. Maybe they're not. Maybe we have some thoughts. We can kind of tease some of that content and talk about those. Maybe we won't get to all 6, but certainly some of those topics that we'll be talking about next year. Now, the first one is penetration testing. Every time I say that, Jeff rolls his eyes, which is fantastic. Like, I just love saying it so I can see Jeff roll his eyes and be like, So John and I John Strand and I are slated to do one that we'll probably record next week that we'll be releasing in January and February as our first in this on-demand series. And I'm kind of touting this as the state of a topic, so the state of penetration testing. I really want to, talk with John about what works, what doesn't, what problems are we trying to solve, what are the best ways to solve those in the light of penetration testing. So I'll throw it out to our illustrious panel.
So are you inviting me to participate in the webinar?
That'd be fantastic. Actually, that would
Wait, are we doing a PCI one?
We can do a PCI one as well. Sure. I mean, if we think it fits, if our listeners think it fits, if our sponsors think, if we all can, agree that it fits, sure.
I want to see a webcast as you as the moderator and Jeff and Jack for PCI.
For PCI. And then John and Jeff and myself on pen testing. So let's talk about the state of pen testing. I mean, episode 500, I can't say that I planned it this way. I was kind of just like, well, it was very much based on our on-demand series, right?
You can say you planned it this way. It would be a lie.
Well, yeah, it would be a lie. So basically, I was like, well, we've got all these people coming in studio for basically to celebrate our episode 500. And I'm like, everyone's got some pretty good opinions, whether they're for pen testing, against pen testing. Like, pen testing would be a great topic. Like, that's literally how much thought I put into that. The feedback that we've gotten from our audience is like, that was some awesome content on pen testing. So my question to the panel today is it still a topic, and what's changed since episode 500 that we could bring to our audience in January and February?
Short answer:
Nothing.
yes, and it changes every day.
So Larry's saying it changes often.
I
And I
think
say nothing, but go ahead.
And Jeff's saying it hasn't changed, so that's interesting. There's still a difference of opinion, which I love. I love that we each have our unique point of view on these issues.
I think that the state of pen testing is really divided, because the state of pen testing for many people is shitty, commoditized, bottom basement, bottom price, the cheapest possible pen test that makes us look good, and we can do the checkbox.
Yep. It's kind of like security and compliance,
general,
Jack, right? It's what you make of it, right?
It is. And so I think that for a lot of people, the state of pen testing is shit.
Yeah.
And then there are people that engage organizations, not to pander to the sponsors, but to that hire Larry or hire Black Hills or hire our friend Trusted Sec or Lars or right. And what they get is not just a commodity product, but it's people who actually care about them improving. They write reports, which report writing is painful, but they're like, hey, in your environment, do this really next year. I don't want to find this, and actually care. And so I think there's a real split. And unfortunately, the commodity part, I think, really is the state of pen testing. And unfortunately, the people that give a shit and are willing to pay for it and are willing to put the effort into it are not the broader state of pen testing.
Jeff, are we?
So
hold on, Jeff.
I
just want to go to Jeff for a second. Are we mitigating business risk with pen testing? Does it, in your mind, accomplish that goal?
With the few exceptions of the companies that hire the InGuardians and the Black Hills, I would say no, not in the slightest.
And I think, Joff, I know you want to answer this. I think that's kind of a loaded question. I think by pen testing, are we mitigating business risk? No. By pen testing, we are not mitigating business risk. By resolving the issues found in the pen test, begin to start mitigating business risk.
Well said.
Because every pen test, even though it may say otherwise in your SOW, is best effort.
Joff?
Yeah, so I want to chime in because I think there's been considerable maturing in the industry as overall status. Certainly from the operating system technology, the micro virtualization technology that's coming out. The defenses are much better, and I'm actually encouraged for the companies like ourselves who are not the script kiddie pen testers. They're not the pen testers that are just running a vulnerability scan. The people that are in that category should be frightened about what's happening. The people that actually have a quality product, who are really putting in great effort, I think still have a career future. So I think we're going to see a distinct evolution, almost a survival of the fittest kind of evolution that's going to occur here in the next year or so. And I'm not disappointed that that's going to happen. I think it's important that it happens. I don't support, endorse, or in any way understand these companies that are just running a vulnerability scanner and sticking a logo on it and calling it a pen test. It actually bothers me greatly, and I would be more than happy to see those people get some pressure to just do better. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, one of the other issues that I've identified this year, and I think a lot of us have latched onto, and I think one of our sponsors, Javelin Networks, who did a bunch of sponsored activity with us, I think coined it very, very well. And they said that Active Directory is insecure by design.
Yes.
And that very much relates to our conversation on pen testing, but also kind of relates to the elephant in the room to all of these enterprises that have implemented Active Directory and either haven't recognized it as a major security problem, or they have, and they don't have the right process, tools, and techniques in order to fix it and make it less of a threat to the organization.
But we've learned from Javelin that it's not fixable.
it is fixable if you pay attention to it. Much like all the things that we've identified as security issues, if you pay attention to them, you can have processes, tools, and techniques that can work towards fixing the problem. I think the problem is many enterprises don't list that as like, oh, this is a problem that I have. That's my concern. Is that when we have a big issue like this, if our security community is not recognizing it as a problem, industry can't come in and help. And whether that's help in education or whether that's help in buying products, I mean, we've all seen like, yeah, I know I have this problem. Yeah, I know I can solve it myself, but like that solution can really help me solve that problem. And those are the ones that we want to highlight for our audience.
I would like to, believe it or not, have a contrarian point of view. I think that
get out.
I think that even the cheap commodity pen tests actually do substantially address and mitigate a critical business risk, and that risk is non-compliance. Mm-hmm. It's not addressing security concerns per se, but non-compliance. I think it was Josh Corman that first said it in some paraphrasing him many, many years ago. It's like, I might get hacked, but I will get audited.
Yeah.
Right. And so there is a business risk of non-compliance. In PCI, it has a set of, there are things that will happen. It will cost you more to process credit cards. Yep. So there's a value in shitty pen tests. However, the value is limited. The value is limited, and it depends on what your goals are. It comes back to you do the bare minimum, and there is business risk to not doing the bare minimum. But we've got to understand those business risks. We've got to understand the motivators, and if your concern is that the cost of processing credit cards is going to go up by 0.13%. That's huge, right? And that needs to be addressed. But I don't know that everybody understands the value of, well, if we spend a bit more, we can not only be compliant, we can actually be more secure. And I think that is happening, or we're getting there. I mean, the question that I would say ask is, imagine that the PCI Council decides tomorrow to remove the requirement for a penetration test.
Oh, fuck.
How many pen testers would be pen testers in a couple of months? And those that deliver value, I hope, would survive because they're delivering value beyond the minimum required value.
Well, so ballpark, Larry or Joff, what percentage of your customers have hired you or originally hired you because of a compliance regulatory requirement? Ballpark.
I would say and I'm maybe speaking out of turn, the ballpark that has asked us specifically to target PCI is probably less than 10%.
Mm-hmm. Joff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in line with Larry. I think not everybody reveals this. Some of them don't. They keep it close to the chest, but I don't think we're a good sample, though. You're talking to InGuardians and Black Hills Information Security, and frankly, we do have some of the best customers in the world, and we're proud of that, obviously. But that means our sample of people asking us for pen tests for compliance reasons is probably much, much less than many of the other companies out there. So I'd like to see the terminology change, to be honest, for people to actually say, you know what, I am a vulnerability scanning and delivery company. I'm not a pen testing company. I mean, we need a little bit of delineation here.
I want to ask the question in this way, Larry and Joff specifically.
Yeah.
How much would your findings reduce if the organizations you pen tested were to address all of the Active Directory security issues?
Oh, I don't like that question.
So
that means it was the right question.
I would like some more clarity. What type of test? Would you like an internet-facing test? Would you like a test, I assume compromise, like an internal type of thing.
I want a test that's going to help me address business risk and reduce the threats against my organization. You tell me.
So,
okay.
Paul,
you may.
I love whining the crank on Jeff on this issue.
Let's take a step further back.
And I have some good. I think I have some answers for you.
Because what we're beating around the bush on is really what is a pen test, and we talked about this on episode 500, where back in the day, in the beginning, a pen test was really a glorified vulnerability assessment. We want to know where we're vulnerable because we've been operating for a while with computers and networks.
We don't know,
and now
we're
we've
vulnerable.
plugged into the internet,
Yeah.
and so we've got this great unknown, attack vector that we need to know about, and that was fine for a while. But and we talked about this on 500, and pen testing the way it should be today in 2017 should really be emulating the threat. It should really be a live fire test. I was talking to somebody in my travels this year about I would love to see PCI not have pen testing be a requirement the way it is, but actually somehow tie it to the annual incident response test. The pen test, and there's different types of reasons why you do a pen test. One of which would be how well do your defenses work, and how well do you do at detecting that something is happening?
Hey, we might be having a pen test sometime between now and the next 6 months. Find them.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great reason to do a pen test. Rarely is that the reason why it's done for the masses.
Yeah. We highly encourage that anytime we do a pen test, in that don't tell your SOC.
Right.
Or tell the management of the SOC, but don't tell the general staff, in that let them find us.
Well,
challenge accepted.
I think that underscores some of the fundamental issues that most enterprises have with the inability to have insights into the endpoint, inability to protect Active Directory, in many of the topics that we talk about. Also, I think one of the other issues for me is the inability for your SOC to have contextualized information about your environment. In other words, I see something bad, but I don't understand what it is, and I don't understand the impact.
Yes.
And that's, now we're starting to go off of Active Directory and start talking about one of those other real problems that enterprises have today.
But I would
indicators of compromise and incident response.
I would still argue that definitely applies to Active Directory. And I'm thinking about some of those that question, and some arguments about phrasing is one. If we're looking at that from an external perspective, and even external is a little bit mushy now. If you bring O365 into the mix, tied to your Active Directory, then it's a different game changer. And how do you monitor stuff from O365 to have that contextualization of what's happening to external resources that are connected to your internal?
But now is it an identity management and authorization and authentication problem as much as it is an Active Directory problem?
I would agree that yes, it is.
That's one of my other big issues.
Or is it a test of your third parties and your providers?
Yes.
And
right.
And you immediately
or how you are utilizing your third parties from a security perspective.
Right.
Look! I have to jump in and make a comment. Active Directory is an incredibly rich source of information, right? For both good and for both bad, right? When we get inside of a network, Active Directory, from a pen tester perspective, is incredibly useful, right? We can enumerate all kinds of things about the environment, and this is what Paul is alluding to. But I think it speaks to the fact that the industry has to, from a defensive perspective, lean more and more to profiling anomaly detection, profiling what is good Active Directory queries, what is normal operational traffic versus what is extremely, out of band, high levels of Active Directory traffic that looks a lot more like reconnaissance. And this is the thing we're not seeing a lot yet in the industry, and this is why pen testers, especially on the internal networks, are getting an incredible amount of traction out of the information they can glean from the Active Directory, because there's basically no controls around it.
Right. And Joff, to dovetail a little bit of that, we don't have a lot of controls, we don't have a lot of insight, and we don't have a lot of knowledge as to what looks normal and what doesn't. in that in very many cases, one of our guys that's been with us for 2+ years, at his 2+ years in Guardians, doing that assumed breach scenario, the internal test, he publicly stated to us and to others, he says, I've been here 2 years and I've yet to launch a single exploit. Right. I've said this before, woohoo, Tyler, you go. I mean, he hasn't launched a single exploit. He's lived off the land. He's used built-in tools. And what is the footprint of the use of those built-in tools that Active Directory and the Microsoft environment grant us from an information perspective and the ability to interact? And what does the footprint of those look like when they are used improperly?
Right. We need to be careful, though, because Active Directory is not bad. Active Directory is not evil.
No.
It's an incredibly useful source of information.
Exactly.
Just because it's being used for malfeasance doesn't mean that it's bad. It is holding these environments together for very positive, productive reasons.
So, is it more of the identity and access management problem is kind of what I'm latching onto, and I think we looked at that like security when we thought of a mainframe back in the day was all about assigning users roles and restricting access to data. It sounds like we've gotten so far away from that in technology today that when we are plopped into an environment, we're so overwhelmed with the complexity that we're just like, well, users have access to anything. But now there's a set of companies out there and a set of strategies that can say, well, you can reel the reins in on that if you do things like privileged identity management or identity and access management. Do we need to get back to that as a more fundamental issue to say, yes, when you're in our environment, an attacker is really, in essence, taking advantage of someone's identity and taking advantage of what they shouldn't have access to rather than restricting that identity to having access to what Jeff was saying in an earlier segment, to what data they only should have access to.
And I think that is very much the case. I think they should, but I think they need to do that to the nth degree. If Larry, the common scenario is lateral movement. If I am able to compromise Paul's credentials, and Paul is now an authenticated user, which workstations can Paul join as an authenticated user?
What does my identity have access to?
Right. Every one of them. But in reality, what should it be? It should be you have access to your machine, and you have maybe one or two others in your department as a backup, and you should have a couple in the library,
and maybe
the
I have
research
access
library.
to that application and maybe that data. And that's
and that lateral movement, you need to turn that down to like not 0. This one goes to 11. You need to turn that down not to 0, but to like 0.01.
You could almost say that even if you do that, though, Larry, if you compromise the right users, you're still going to have access to the data that could then kind of be the end of that organization.
Right, but now you have to get the right user, and that right user is like, it's not shooting fish in a barrel, it's shooting fish in a pond and just firing randomly. So the chances of that happening are significantly less.
And I think one of the strategies we've talked about is to make it more difficult for the attacker so that you increase your visibility as an attacker to achieve your end goal, and you're kind of decreasing that time to detection.
But
wind the crank, Jeff.
We could do this. This could be the whole segment, and we won't get around to the other topics. A lot of what we're talking about from the Guardians, Black Hills, sort of the elite level pen testing perspective, really there's only a handful of companies in the grand scheme of things out there that are mature enough to need that. We're talking about Active Directory. Generically, I think we could lump it into vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities.
I call them more exposures than vulnerabilities.
Well,
but
I was going to qualify vulnerabilities, not just bugs, but just features. Just the way things work.
I have like 6 or 7 I identify in the talk.
After we had our episode a couple weeks ago, where we were asking for the feedback from the Sands Pen Test Hackfest, I got quite a bit of feedback from a couple different people. I hope Ed didn't watch that episode, but one person I was talking to was saying, basically what I was saying is most pen testing firms that I've been exposed to as a PCI consultant over the past 10 years or so, most of what they did in terms of results, you could have walked in and after an hour conversation, tell us your architecture, tell us your topology, tell us your business operations.
Came to the same findings.
You could have pretty much told them what the problems were going to be in an hour. Yeah. And this one person that was talking to me is like, yeah, we're trying to do that. You know, pen testing in an hour. We'll give you the same results. They do a little bit of testing. They do some stuff, technical stuff. But, I mean, I remember when I used to do pen testing, by the time we were done interviewing the customer or having that kickoff meeting, we had a pretty good idea of what we were going to do.
Yep.
And
that's still the case, by the way.
Yes.
And that doesn't comfort me.
Right.
Because, for all the pen testing companies out there beyond you guys, how often do you as a pen tester, tell your customer, hey, before we get started, here's 20 things that you should make sure that you're on top of, because it's the 20 things that we try that we usually succeed at. Like, we've had how many interviews with people saying, oh, the top 5 ways that we break in are the same things that are the way we break in.
Jack, hold on, Jack, I have a question for you. Can you replace
Josh Jabra's it's like, done. We're done here.
Jack, can you replace vulnerability management with threat modeling? That's basically what Jeff is saying.
We can have a great discussion with some people, because there's an argument to be made that, like, asset-based defense is dumb. You need systemic defenses, but the flip side is, if you don't know what you've got, how do you build great? How do you build
systemic? You can't do the threat modeling unless you know what you have.
One of the things that, as we've been talking about, like Active Directory and other things that came back to me, is I started out as a manager, not a technology manager, but a department manager, using Unix-based systems with specific applications, a suite of applications designed for running auto industry stuff, car dealerships. And we had a level of granular control that was amazing. If you worked in the parts department, you could do these things. If you were new in the parts department, you could do these things, but not the manager level stuff. You sure didn't see the accounting or payroll or anything. The just stunning granular level of control that we had with, the bespoke Unix-based stuff was amazing. And then we started rolling out PCs, and my first reaction was, what a pile of shit. I can do anything I want with these things. And the first things I started discovering were like the terminal emulators, 3270 emulators. Well, a 3270 terminal can only do specific things. An emulator can do whatever it can emulate, and now the world's wide open. So advanced decades, we're fucked.
Joe is still on the line. And Joe, I know you have a lot of experience working in the government as well. And when we talk about this topic in this context, I feel like the military and government almost has an advantage in they've been doing data classification for some time. Does that give the military and government an advantage, Joe? The fact that they can classify their data and really define who has access to it and who shouldn't? Does that give them an advantage? And can we learn from that in the enterprise?
Yes and no. And the reason I say that is, if we learned one thing from the Snowden leak, it is that overclassification is sometimes used, I'm afraid to use the term, but as a weapon. So do they know about data classification? Absolutely. Do they do it appropriately? Not always. Sometimes it's just a matter of keeping one program or another from seeing your files, for example. So with regards to this, I mean, to a degree, yes, but to a degree, no. I hate to default to this, but it really boils down to it's all about the implementation.
Yeah, well, I think that's Jack's point as well. He's like, yeah, when we had all these Linux systems with terminals, like, we were good. When we had a paper-based
before
system.
Linux.
No, this is Unix. So.
Unix.
And before Active Directory.
Right, so when we had paper, we were good.
Right, before Active Directory, there was
before
NIS.
Back when we had
and before
punch
NIS, there was Yellow Pages.
Right.
And there were similar issues.
This was before IREX, to put it in perspective for the old-timers. Punch cards! I remember fuzzing punch card systems with my golf shoes, damn it!
That's awesome.
I don't know, but I'm in my early 30s, and to date, the submarine that I was stationed on, we actually loaded some of our crypto using punch cards for a while. So
that was probably something that Jeff wrote.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised.
That's a sad statement on our government.
You didn't have the Kick 13? Darn it.
Oh, man.
So,
could we have a second topic?
Yeah,
I
please.
want to talk about
Please,
endpoint
begging.
detection, and in this one is we talk about endpoint detection and response, and I think it's expanding out into endpoint detection, response, and protection. We talked about all these issues that happen once you gain access and gain a foothold. I think one of the goals of endpoint protection is to prevent that attacker from gaining a foothold. Is this a reality in today's world? Are we progressing to the point where we can implement these technologies on the endpoint? Because we all know it's email phishing that leads to an endpoint that gives you the foothold that allows you to move laterally.
Well, that's not a problem anymore because nobody has administrative access on their own workstation.
Well, then there's that.
Oh, wait.
problem solved.
Industry.
Jack drops the mic and walks off.
Before we go down the Jack cynical road, too late, we already did. But I have tested some customers that were able to arrest my C2 channel before I could do anything of any sort of consequence, right? So we do have the ability there, technologically and people-wise, to have that almost zero-based dwell time. It does exist.
No, it absolutely does. I think there's still unicorns, but there's one organization that I know of that's the workstations are locked down very thoroughly. They're a profitable organization, so they can put the time and money into figuring out what people need to do their jobs and giving them that and only that. That's a luxury a lot of organizations don't have, is being profitable enough to actually spend the time, which is money, and the money to do that sort of work. So it's possible, but it's difficult. And there are certain industries and certain verticals and certain strata in those industries. One that's easy is kind of the mid-tier financials are big targets, but they're not monoliths and hard to move. They tend to have they're all over the place, but it's more likely that the big regional bank does things well, for example. Because they're not so big they can't manage it. They're not doing so much merger and acquisition that they can't control it, but they're profitable and heavily regulated, so they do it well. That's one it's a broad painting with a broad brush, but there are places where that works. There are other high profit industries where it makes sense, high profit, high target. Others that are in commodity industries, it's really hard to justify that money until you're compromised. And we go back to I told you so budgeting.
So many companies that I've spoken to this year are really messaging on the points of how do we help the SOC analyst detect the threats and respond to them sooner and with the best information. Is that a valid strategy? Can this be accomplished today? And how does that help us be more resilient to both pen testers and attackers?
Like a lot of things, I see two directions on that. One is by saying that means I get to blame you, the SOC analyst. It's your fault because we gave you the tools, but we didn't really, and we didn't give you the authority to actually follow through. Others actually are really trying. They're like, oh, how many alerts do you get a day from this system? Oh, well, no wonder you don't respond.
Right.
I turn, I'm an executive and I turn off my phone at 5 o'clock at night because I can't deal with it. And then like 9 before I go to sleep, I check messages. I was like, why don't we apply that to the poor sock monkeys, right? We're like, I don't know I don't have enough context in this environment to know whether I should worry about this. So it depends. A lot of things are blame shifting, but for organizations that are really trying to instrument their environments, I think it's great. But I call me cynical because I am. I don't think enough organizations truly mean that.
Interesting. A handful of vendors I've taken briefings with this year that I'm kind of excited about, and I want to gauge your level of excitement, are trying to provide that
Not
context
much
to the
right
SOC.
now. You want to come sit on Santa's lap and
No.
it'll get better?
I don't. But they're trying to provide that context to the SOC
Right.
analyst. Do you think that's a reality?
I think it is. However, if I walk into your environment with a tool, here's my magic thing. I actually care about you, the SOC analyst, and I haven't considered how it works with all the other tools in the environment.
Okay.
I'm not really helping you as much as I think I am. If, going back to kindergarten lessons, if what I offer you plays well with others, then I absolutely believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a challenge we have. It's one of the many challenges in security tools and awareness tools is that if it doesn't play well with others, no matter how valuable the context is, at some point in time, you're dumping shit into Excel and trying to figure out where it goes. And as soon as that's the solution, you're screwed. So I believe that a lot of people believe that that's what they offer, but until we see that it actually really helps you on the keyboards, I don't believe it.
I feel like that's the bar, and I see it even outside of security in our own processes here at Security Weekly. If you're using email or Excel,
right,
it means that there's a solution that we should be using for that, but maybe that doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the world's most widely deployed file sharing system? Email.
Yeah.
Right? It's what's the world's most widely fill in the blank analysis system? It's Excel. Right? What's address book? Database? I mean, what was it? How many years ago did they go to the million by million? Million rows by million columns? Then it became a replacement for databases. And the only real upside to that is it largely killed Excel, which needed to die.
I mean, even I talk about my when I teach 617, I talk about a couple of my uber elite hacking tools, and that's VI, Unix strings, and Excel. It's like, what? How is this even possible?
You were right.
And what do you write your reports in?
VI, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, Word, but
Yeah.
I could write it in VI and then just
you said it.
Yeah, I did. I could write it in Excel too, but that's.
But I feel like the solutions need to be able to replace some of these tools to feed into a process, right?
Not to be completely cynical and negative, I think some are getting there, but that's one of the things that I think, particularly in enterprise, in large organizations, does this play well with others is a huge barrier that a lot of people get wrong, certainly at first.
Along those lines, a lot of folks struggle with integrating these various technologies, as we identified so far. This new field is emerging in security automation and orchestration. That is a lot of us security professionals very concerned when we see the word automation and we see the word orchestration, and we try and understand how this actually helps us. Do we think this is a valid strategy, moving forward, to adopt these technologies that are basically going to help us integrate our technology and our processes together, basically to get away from Excel and email to accomplish goal?
I think done well, it works. It goes back to the fundamentals of system administration, right? If you do a repetitive task daily, then you need to script it and stop doing it manually.
I've had those thoughts. I always remember the T-shirt or the bumper sticker that says I could replace you with a very small shell script.
Right.
I feel like that's the entire industry of security automation.
And that's the history of Hack 5.
Yeah.
They were working in government, and they found that they could automate themselves out of a job and still get paid for it and do this podcast.
There you go.
That was the old story, anyways.
That's it. There are all these stories that you hear, but if you can automate those things, and the idea with automation and with orchestration and all of these things done well, it should do the things that you can script, program, code. But it should present to you the things that require your personal experience, your knowledge of your environment, and your exposures, your vulnerabilities, your risks, your sensitivity to risk, right? I mean, the mundane shit should be distilled down, and I should put you little tiny pieces of shit on a silver platter just for you. And I think automation orchestration done well can do that. But you can't trust it blindly.
Right. There needs to be and actually the messaging from these companies that I'm hearing is that they're interjecting a human component into these processes.
The best of them are doing that. hey, this we all know about, we're going to ignore it. You can always go look at it, but this is, anomalous, or this is outside of the boundaries you've set, or this is a first-time event, or whatever it is. And, done well, which I believe some people do, it's valuable. The challenge is, at some point in time, we have to trust the systems to a level where we really just can't get a clean understanding of why they made the decisions they did. When we get into systems, buzzword alert, machine and learning, artificial intelligence, at some level...
We had to go there eventually.
Oh, my God.
At some level, these things are going to do things we don't understand and can't really get to. It's like, hey, look at this. So there are two approaches here. Look at this, or ask why it presented this. And they're both valid, but why did it present me this is not something we're always going to get an answer to as we automate more and more.
It could have derived the why it made that algorithm from based on your behavior. Some of the technology I'm seeing basically looks at the decisions that humans are making and then develops AI and machine learning based on the decisions that so the AI is learning from us to make even more enhanced decisions, but it's largely based on our behaviors and our own analytics. I think that's really cool.
So to tie that around a little bit, when we talk about the vulnerability scanning and all this stuff, and I remember trying to sell to a customer recently, saying, "Hey, what we really need is we need a vulnerability assessment externally, and we'd like you guys to do that for us." Well, you guys understand that we're the best of the best, and whatever, And they said, "Oh yeah, absolutely, we understand." I said, "You do realize we're going to come in a little bit higher priced?" And they said, "Oh yeah, we understand that." And we came in, and the quote was like, "Whoa!" So we got these other quotes from these other places, and like, you're a heck of a lot more expensive than these other places were for this vulnerability assessment. And we said, yeah, because we told you that we're going to do a vulnerability assessment, and we're going to understand what your business is about and what your customers look like and all these things that you do and what your environment is about. And we're going to do some interviews, and then we're going to take the results from the tools and some of our manual confirmation of some of the stuff, and we're going to base that against what you do for business and whether this is an actual risk to your environment. And then we're going to categorize those risks based on what we know about your environment as to what the tool told us. And they're like, yeah, you guys are like 10 times more expensive than the other folks that are going to run that are going to run Nessus and it's a report.
And that's a great example of an aspect to all of this that we're not touching on, and it touches on all the topics, is the vast majorities of organizations out there can't afford a pen test, whatever level it is.
Yeah.
They don't have a SOC. They've got an IT department.
Maybe one person focused on security.
They're not mature enough there, and they never will be. And sort of the as an old timer, crotchety, not as cynical as Jack, but maybe more. I don't know.
Depends on the issue.
This whole industry is sort of predicated upon, and I've been doing a lot of shows this year on behalf of Security Weekly and otherwise, talking to vendors. Everything is predicated on the enterprise, the big company that can afford all these cool things.
Yeah, but come on, Jeff. That's where the money is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if we're as security practitioners ever going to advance this whole thing called security, we have to figure out a way to reach the masses, the 99%, in ways that is affordable and it makes sense, and that necessarily entails automation and orchestration. They need to buy tools that can do the stuff, but then they fall into but we don't know what it does. We just want to do it for them.
Or they need to be effective in that acquisition.
Experienced professionals can provide.
But no vendor wants to talk about this because there's no money in the masses. They need to sell their stuff to the enterprise.
I think there is. I think there is certainly. When I've taken a number more briefings than ever before with the industry as our shows expand.
Sure.
I'm finding I'm kind of playing that, God forbid I say it, the analyst role, right, in evaluating these technologies. There are some.
Next, you'll be an auditor.
I know, right? So some of the vendors are approaching and we try and draw the lines, right, between small business and mid-market and small enterprise, and are there different personas and different challenges in each of those areas? And there are vendors, security vendors, that are targeting those markets, and I think some better than others. And I do hope that we're able to highlight some of the vendors that are helping those in the small business and the mid-market to solve their problems. And I think what Larry was describing was, yeah, there's some automation that happens, but there's also some experience and human intervention that needs to tie those pieces together, because they don't have the staff that maybe a smaller enterprise or enterprise have to tie those pieces together.
And I think that was very much, thanks, Paul, that it was very much there's some automation that happens, there's some great things that happen, but it really becomes the human intervention that happens with all.
So as a segue,
and to add to that briefly, I think Jack was alluding to a really good point, and that is those teams that have a very tight integration. Jack was doing it in a cynical way, but I'm going to do it in a positive way. Those teams that have a great integration vertically between their management and their technical teams, they're going to see much more success, because they're going to acquire technologies and acquire expertise in a much more intelligent manner, and be able to spend that dollar much more wisely.
And that's much of what we talk about on Startup Security Weekly, and addressing that issue that we have in communication and leadership and innovation, and how those tie together, and how so you might want to do a startup, but when you're working in an organization in security, you have to sell solutions and technology and security inside your own organization. Sometimes you have to sell a process, right? What we talk about is security being a process. Sometimes you got to go sell that to your organization, and we talked a lot about technologies, but what Geoff's bringing up is a lot of security fundamentally is really about communication and process, and you might have to sell that.
Which sort of ties into the other topic that you mentioned, is the whole idea of training and education.
Yep.
If more companies and more individuals that are responsible for security, or just the technology in their companies, had a more foundational knowledge of security, that they knew what they were getting into, they knew the limitations of the technology that they can afford to employ, they're better equipped, as they're being inundated with all the different technologies that they must have, or they should have, or they could have, and they make more sense of, well, what is it we're trying to do? What is it we're trying to accomplish? What do we have to do? What do we need to do? What would we like to do? And to me, it just makes the whole training thing is not only learning the technical skills, but also understanding the context, so that you become a more informed consumer.
Well, and I think you're one of the, and I kind of differentiate it, right? You're learning about some of the problems that we know about, that we need to solve, and some unique ways in which you could solve those problems. The education piece that for me is somewhat more interesting is, what about those problems I don't know I have? How do I learn about those? How do I get trained up on those? And then how do I seek out and evaluate solutions that fit my organization?
You hire a pen testing company,
you can do that.
They tell you the 500 things that are wrong with with your organization, and you don't address any of them because you're like, wow, you're so overwhelmed. Or you just run a scanner and find out all the problems.
Michael Santorcangelo framed it best. He said, you have to fall in love with the problem and fall in love with the solution. And sometimes we talk about problems that we didn't know we have. So you got to have that conversation to make people kind of fall in love with the problem. Like, oh, like Active Directory, like, really didn't know I had that. That's some of the value of a pen test. Like, I didn't know I had that problem. It helps you fall in love with the problem. Then you go to find a solution that you fall in love with as well. And every vendor has their unique point of view on that solution, and which one should you choose. And that's part of your security training and education kind of awareness, which was an interesting aspect that I kind of delved into this year that I thought was really interesting. So I know we're running a little short on time. I thought it was a fantastic discussion, by the way.
Agreed.
If you have feedback, please send it to us. As I said before the show, I was telling some of the hosts that we've got a series of 12 webcasts that we're doing next year. We've got another series of 6 webcasts that we run on demand that will largely cover the topics that we talked about in this segment. If you feel strongly,
and then some.
And if you feel strongly about topics or want information, please reach out. We'll be reaching out to our audience with a survey as well to make sure that we're hitting on the topics that you want to learn about. And as we end the show, Larry's going to take us out, and Joff is going to make some Vegemite.
Yeah,
whatever that is.
We're going to wrap to another segment for Joff to do Vegemite
for a live audience.
For a live audience. But with that, over and get the heck out.
Over and out. Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. So, we've been having some discussions with some of the co-hosts about this mysterious substance called Vegemite. Now, Vegemite is a favorite amongst all Australians. We're raised on it, brought up on it, and many around the world are quite curious about what this stuff is and what it means to eat it as a breakfast spread. Those in the UK world understand that there is a sort of semi-equivalent called Marmite, but those of us in Australia think that Marmite is a poor substitute for a Vegemite. But that's an opinion thing. So what we thought we'd do is do a bit of a segment on Vegemite and just talk about what is the appropriate way to eat Vegemite. So to start that off, first of all, I'm going to show you a 220-gram jar of Vegemite. It's made by Kraft Foods. It is produced around the world. It's a little bit hard to come by in the United States nowadays, but I managed to order some off of Amazon. In fact, I ordered a dozen jars for myself. Nice. Now, many Australians living in the States, they love to actually have their Vegemite because they were raised on it, and it's hard to get away from it.
And may have actually been popularized somewhere in the U.S. Based on the Men at Work song.
Indeed, right?
Yep.
That's a very good reference, Larry. Vegemite, I Come From the Land Down Under, has a line in it.
She gave me a Vegemite sandwich.
That's right. I met a man from Brussels. He was 6 foot tall and full of muscles. I said, "Can you give me I forgot the exact line, something," and he just said, "I'll give you a Vegemite sandwich." So it was very similar. But a Vegemite sandwich is not the way we typically eat Vegemite in Australia.
Right. The one from Brussels. Would you do that?
That was the man from Brussels. That's right. I have Exhibit A here, which is my toaster from the kitchen that my wife begrudgingly provided for the segment. And so I have a piece of toast here, which is actually pre-toasted, and I'm going to warm it up just a little bit. And what we do when we eat Vegemite, the most effective way and the most tasty way to eat Vegemite is to spread it very, very thinly on a piece of toast. The mistake that most Americans make, because they're used to the habit of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, is to over-apply the Vegemite. Now, what you must understand is that Vegemite is a yeast extract that is very full of vitamin B, and it's also extremely salty. So if you over-apply Vegemite as if it were peanut butter, you will fail miserably, and you will not like the taste of it. If you lightly apply Vegemite with the appropriate amount of butter on a piece of toast, you will almost certainly like it, or maybe not. It's a matter of opinion, but it's definitely a case of being able to do it the right way. Yes. So here we go. I'm gonna pop my piece of toast out of the toaster here. I feel like a complete shill advertising Vegemite, but
yeah. And Joff, to for the record, while you're popping your toast there, the verse is buying bread from a man in Brussels. He was 6'4" and full of muscles. I said, "You speak in my language." He just smiled and gave me a Vegemite sandwich.
Vegemite sandwich. So I'm going to apply a fairly liberal amount of butter. Now the butter I'm applying here is more of a olive oil based butter. It's a little bit healthier than your average butter. But the important part is when I apply my Vegemite here, I'm going to put it on the stool that's next to me. I'm going pretty thin. And you notice here I've just got a little bit on the top of the bread. Mm-hmm. I'll put a little bit more on there.
That is minute amounts of Vegemite.
It is. And this is the important thing to understand because it's strong stuff. You don't want to go too far. So what I tend to do when I apply this is just to get about that much, just a little bit on top of the toast. And when you get it to that point, that's a gracious plenty. You don't want to go any further than that.
And Joff, how you described it earlier, I would maybe consider that more than I expected.
Well, perhaps. This depends on the individual, but right. I wouldn't go much further than just a little bit. You want to be able to see your bread through it, have your butter mixed up in it, and it makes it very tasty. And then you can take your taste of it. Very good. Yeah.
So, Josh,
nice and salty.
For an American, and you've lived in the States, I don't know how long, what would you say is the taste equivalent? Is there an equivalent in
So
the
it's very
States?
savory. This is not a sugary substance at all. It's a yeast extract. It's kind of a salty, tangy taste. It mixes well with the butter normally. So I don't know that there is much of equivalent. If you're used to sugary spreads, this is absolutely not that.
Definitely not.
I
have in fact both eaten Marmite and Vegemite, and I agree that Vegemite is Marmite is not a substitute for Vegemite, and actually brought some small packets home back for the family. My wife enjoyed it. The kids thought it was fucking nasty. Pardon my French.
Yep.
But the big thing that I think would maybe make it even more appealing is, in fact, the butter.
Yep, that's absolutely right. That's a very good point, Larry. You've got to get some butter on there because mixing the two up together is what really gives you the good flavor. And and it's just not sugary. And the other thing I would add to that comment is if you are hungover in the morning, which some of us in the information security community sometimes get into that state. I'm not quite sure why. Vegemite is one of the most excellent hangover cures you can possibly find because it happens to be very rich in vitamin B, niacin, and let's see, I'm struggling with the glasses here. Thiamine,
niacin,
which is your B1. So it's really one of the truly miracle hangover cures, actually. So for those in the infosec industry,
no wonder why Australians
recommend.
love it so much, given the stereotype.
Yeah. So that's my Vegemite segment. I hope the Australian listeners that are fans truly appreciate that, and maybe we'll get this published somewhere.
Well, and for context, I was at a conference a couple weeks ago called Insecurity Conference in Maryland, and I met a couple Australians. They are with a company called FunCaptcha, FUNCAPTCHA, and they were giving out Australian delicacies as samples at their booth. And I saw the Vegemite, and I'm like, Vegemite, I've always wanted to try it. But I didn't want to try it without doing, knowing how to do it the right way. So I have several packs. They have like little sample packs. It's almost like a little butter pack.
Yep. And that's about enough for a slice of toast.
And that should be like one serving. It's probably maybe a teaspoon. So now I know I can go home and put that on my. Do you ever do anything other than bread? Can you put it on an English muffin, or is that faux pas?
Oh, you certainly can. I would highly recommend, toasting a muffin, but at the same time, mixing the butter with it as well, because I think that combination of the butter and the Vegemite is really the right mix. It makes it taste really good, and it gives you the right result, and it's what most of us grew up on. Like I said, but the biggest mistake for a lot of people is they over apply it. They're like, oh goodness, I need to put a whole inch of spread on this thing, and it's not peanut butter.
Right.
You don't need to do that. A little bit goes a long way.
It's not peanut butter. It's not apple butter. It's not marmalade or jelly. It's just a very thin coating. The FunCaptcha guys, they posted. I don't know if you've ever had them or heard of them, Joff, but apparently there's something called a Vegemite ice pop.
Oh, I have not heard of that or them, actually, but that's interesting.
Apparently they're a thing, and they're willing to send some to us.
Well, that would be quite interesting. Even I might not like that, but I will admit, and Jeff, I'm willing to send you a jar. If you want a 220-gram jar, I just got my dozen ordered, and I don't think I'm going to be able to eat a dozen in a year. But I can send you a big jar if you're interested once you put it on your toast and get to enjoy it the right way.
Joff, if that offer stands, I'd love a jar.
Oh, absolutely, Larry. I'll send you one.
Beautiful.
Cool. All right. For all the Australians out there, Vegemite. Thank you.
Vegemite. That's a wrap.